One Piece Supreme Control, Chapter 41-60. Chapter 41 _ I'm still full of energy, full of momentum, overlord, domineering, firm belief, fearless courage, the persecution between life and death. I have a feeling that maybe, I can succeed. Yang Qing stared at the sea kings in front of him, his pupils shrunk into a slit. The sweat on his forehead was unknowingly flowing out, and the whole body was also submerged in sweat. But if it doesn't work, then it turns out that we all have to die. The pressure is really great. Sweat dripped down the deck, making a crisp sound. Captain, what is he doing? Robin asked nervously. Since just now, Lucifer has been standing in the bow position, staring closely at the sea kings, as if to demonstrate with his eyes. Maria's eyes flashed. She adjusted her glasses, and said solemnly, he is inspiring the hidden power in his body, awakening the tyrannical domineering. What ____________? Who knows? Moria rolled her eyes. Who said such a thing? However, if it is their captain, maybe there is a great chance. The huge bodies of the sea kings swam in the sea, making a violent collision sound, splashing a large amount of water, and their progress caused ripples on the calm sea surface, and they were 10 meters away from the wooden boat. The huge pressure of life and death enveloped the 4 people on the wooden boat, making them all nervous. Crack. Sweat kept falling, almost like rain. Yang Qing's whole body was tense and almost stiff under the huge pressure. His thoughts were condensed into one. At this moment, apart from the sea kings in front of him, there was nothing else, and even the wooden boat beside him disappeared from his sight. The sea kings continued to move forward, and the distance was only 5 meters. The power they moved forward caused the wooden boat to shake violently. Dangerous, a step further. In Yang Qing's world, everything around him slowed down. He felt a strange aura rising from the depths of his body at the moment, which was different from killing intent, and fighting spirit. This momentum can suppress everything and destroy everything in front of him that is inferior to him above the aura. But this breath is very weak. He is made of the purest will, courage, spirit and other nihilistic things in his body, and there is only a faint one. Unknowingly, Yang Qing closed his eyes and carefully experienced this power. Under the oppression of a life and death crisis, he faintly felt that this breath, even if it was not an overlord, could save them. The Sea King class continued to move forward, 4 meters, 3 meters, 2 meters, just at the moment of the last meter. The Sea Kings moved violently, and the huge body seemed to jump up and completely destroy the wooden boat. At this moment, Moria shouted from the deck, "Cover your nose." Dylan's and Robin were stunned for a moment, and then quickly followed suit, while Yang Qing, who closed his eyes, suddenly opened his eyes and stared at the Sea King in front of him. Crack, buzz. The two voices seemed to sound at the same time, and the pungent smell spread throughout the wooden boat. Then, with 3, bang bang bang, sounds, all the 3 people on the wooden boat fell to the ground, their eyes turned white, and they passed out. On the opposite side of the wooden boat, the Sea Kings who were about to pounce suddenly shrank, and then panicked and fled in all directions. They seemed to see terrible things, and they were very scared. Woohoo! Did you succeed? Ha ha! Yang Qing bent over. His face was covered in sweat, looking a little hideous. He gasped violently, then spread out his hands, fell to the ground with a bang, and passed out. The 4 Sea Kings retreated a full 100 meters, and then they looked at this place in fear, and they did not want to approach even a meter. Their 4 huge bodies surrounded this place for a while, and then guarded in fear, never daring to dare near. When Yang Qing woke up again, what he saw was Molia's delicate face, her skin that could be broken, like a ripe peach, and her perfect face, like the most beautiful goddess. At the moment, he is seriously helping him wipe his face, and his focused look makes Yang Qing sluggish for a while. Awake. Noticing Yang Qing's eyes, Molia said lightly, her cold temperament exuding a unique charm. Yes, awake. Yang Qing tried to get up, but was stopped by the latter. Take a good rest, your overdraft is too serious, it will take at least a month to recover. Moria got up and was about to leave, and when she got to the door, she said, the next time you fight, the skills that consume vitality and mental energy are still don't use it anymore. Otherwise, I can't make it up for you. Ah, all right. Yang Qing was a little flustered. This cold Moria was so charming, he actually had a quick heartbeat like Dylan's. Besides, I'll ask you one last question. Moria pushed her glasses. Then, is it a tyrannical domineering? Okay, you don't need to answer, just continue to rest. Moria turned to leave, and quickly disappeared here. Seeing Moria leave, Yang Qing closed his eyes, snapped his fingers with his right hand, and a circle of masks appeared, and then quickly enveloped him and took control of his body. He clearly saw that in his sea of consciousness, there was a unique aura that was suffused with brilliance, exuding a domineering aura toward the surroundings. The Overlord is domineering, it should be. A ray of light flashed in Yang Qing's eyes, and then he dissipated his fruit ability and continued to rest. A month later, the wooden boat is still floating quietly in the. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. On the sea, in the distance, the 4 sea kings did not make any movement, closing their eyes and basking in the sun. For them, there is nothing wrong with changing places. Yang Qing and Dylan's had all recovered from their injuries and became very healthy. Walking out of the room, Yang Qing came to the deck. Dylan's was sweating, and he was lifting and lowering the 100-pound pressure in his hand, cycling back and forth. A battle made Dylan's deeply realize that his strength is far from enough, and he needs to continue to exercise. He honed his physique during the day and exercised his devil fruit ability at night, and his strength was slowly improving. Mariah was still quietly flipping through his books, as if she would never finish it. Everything seems to be very comfortable, if not the boat can't move. Captain, our food is almost finished. With such a sudden cry, Yang Qing covered his forehead, and the headache started to happen again. Chapter 42 Black 5 Colors. Food is a big problem, but it's not a problem either. In this windless zone, although there are sea kings everywhere, there are still some small fish. Of course, compared to the fish species in other sea areas, they are also huge. The smallest is also 3 or 4 meters long and 1 meter wide. Dylan's. With a wave of his hand, Yang Qing called Dylan's unceremoniously, "You can do it." Dylan's had a black line on his face, and put the dumbbell in his hand on the deck, making a dull crashing sound. The wooden boat swayed gently, and he strode forward. "I'm not a nanny. I'm not a cook. Well, please, we have to be here for a long time to come." Yang Qing's eyes flashed. His eyes were serious and serious. Oh, Dylan's eyes narrowed, his right hand stretched out, and with a hum sound, a huge fish suddenly appeared on the deck, and then he was stepped on and stopped struggling. "We are still too weak." Yang Qing sighed, and the 3 people on board fell into silence. In the days that followed, the wooden boat stayed peacefully in this sea area, and the 4 sea kings wandered about 100 meters away, never daring to approach. A lot of IQ will be remembered for a lifetime. And Yang Qing, Dylan's, and Robin began to practice hard. Dylan's exercised his body every day, sweated, honed his will, and improved his devil fruit ability, while Yang Qing exercised his body during the day, and fought under the covers at night, starting to blow up the game of the system. This system called Swordsman is a game that allows you to incarnate the characters inside, and then get through each swordsman opponent to get enough broken silver. These pieces of silver can be exchanged for martial arts secrets in the system, making him stronger. As the system of Swordsman, it can be said that it is simple and rude, and the only thing that is exhausting is that it takes a very long time to accumulate. Slowly closing his eyes, Yang Qing entered the system. The challenge begins, the 56th level, the opponent, black and 5 colors. A figure shrouded in black appeared in front of him. His whole body was wrapped in black robes, only his shining eyes could be seen. His right hand slowly drew his sword, and the 2 looked at each other sharply. Call. With the sound of the wind, the 2 figures began to traverse the space, turning into phantoms, and the long swords in their hands constantly clashed, making a crisp collision sound. Yang Qing's eyes were sharp, the muscles in his body trembled slightly, and the infuriating energy in his body also accelerated. It can be noticed that there is also a faint breath flowing in the body of the opposite person, and his eyes are as bright as open fire. During the entire battle, the two of them didn't say a word. All they had was their concentration on the battle and the persistence of the long sword in their opponents. Swords, lights, swords and shadows, the entire shining space was silent, and the crisp sound of swords resounded. The battle was stalemate for 3 minutes. Both of them were masters of swordsmanship, and their swordsmanship was superb. The person on the opposite side, after 10 rounds, Yang Qing could tell that the sword technique he used was also Dugu 9 swords. It can be said that he is facing a master who is not inferior to himself at the moment. This battle is very difficult. Sweat dripped from Yang Qing's forehead silently, and the long sword stabbed out diagonally from the northwest, blocking the man's strange sword. When the crisp sound of the impact came out, Yang Qing's eyes narrowed. A master, an absolute master. The two bent their knees, stepped back 5 meters, and looked at each other with solemn eyes. The battle was still silent except for the slight breathing between the two of them. The battle was very difficult. After an hour of fighting, Yang Qing was almost exhausted, before he slashed the opponent with a sword and exited the system space with a heavy breath. After a night of rest, on the second day, Yang Qing felt that the mental power in his body had obviously increased, and even his physique had improved a lot. The systematic game allows him to gain experience of growth. At this point, he can be much faster than other people who rely on hard cultivation. The overlord is domineering, he doesn't seem to be very skilled, and sometimes he is not very good. Yang Qing frowned slightly, but how should this thing be practiced? There is no detailed plan at all. Walking out of his room silently, Yang Qing saw the 4 Sea Kings 100 meters away at a glance, and his eyes became brighter. Come out. In the original work, Luffy awakened the Overlord color several times, and it was also in this situation. Great courage, great fearlessness, great courage, and extremely condensed will, only then can the will of the Overlord be tempered. Durance. Yang Qing shouted loudly. Dylan's, who was holding a 200-pound dumbbell, shuddered. The dumbbell fell suddenly, almost hitting his foot, causing the latter to break out in a cold sweat. Why? Dylan's face was very stinky, and the 200-pound dumbbell really fell, and he would become a leg in the future. Teleport me there. Yang Qing pointed to the 4 lazy Sea Kings 100 meters away. Dylan's was stunned for a moment, then changed his color and said, "Do you want to die? Don't forget that you ate a devil fruit. Hurry up." Yang Qing's tone was beyond doubt. Dylan's face became even more stinky. How could this person be like this? Did he hear what he said? Moria also came out, looked up at the two of them slightly, looked back, and started to do gymnastics. Robin was holding his face and facing the sea in a daze. He seemed to be thinking about his hometown and didn't pay any attention to the things here. You killed yourself, it's none of my business. Dylan's waved his hand, and with a sound of boom, Yang Qing's figure suddenly disappeared. Ah, where's the captain? Robin seemed to have reacted and said in surprise. There, Moria's pale hands. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Pointing to the Sea Kings 100 meters away, I saw a figure above the heads of the 4 Sea Kings, and it was Yang Qing. Ah, Dylan's, you want to murder the captain, you bad guy. Robin yelled, his face turning blue with fright. Dylan's had a black line on his face and covered his forehead. What does this have to do with him? Did you not hear the conversation just now? On the other hand, Yang Qing suddenly appeared above the heads of the 4 Sea Kings, and his face immediately became extremely dignified. Only face to face with such a huge creature can one feel the huge pressure coming from him. Big, too big. Roar. The Sea Kings also noticed the abnormal movement above their heads and let out a low roar. At the same time, they also recognized the little human being in front of them. They couldn't help but panic and began to tremble. Overlord, Domineering. Yang Qing gathered his mental will and closed his eyes abruptly, then opened them and glared. The wind blew gently, and the Neptune was stunned, not understanding what the human being was doing. Sweat appeared on Yang Qing's face, and he didn't succeed. Does it have to rely on luck to inspire the overlord domineering? Chapter 43 6 years. The next moment, the 4 sea kings, without being polite at all, opened their mouths, roared, and swallowed towards Yang Qing. 9 swords of Dugu. Sing. The sound of the sword sounded, and the long sword turned into a streamer. Yang Qing's figure was dashing, shuttling between the 4 sea kings. Yes, his single combat ability is very strong, that is because his explosive power is very strong, and no one can stop point attacks, but in the face of this huge sea king, he can't do it all at once. Roar. The sea king who was stabbed, his face was painful, and he was finally furious, his eyes were blood red, and he roared and bit towards Yang Qing. This time, Yang Qing was in a hurry, and cold sweat broke out. Constantly jumping and beating between the 4 sea kings, the figure has turned into lightning, and the situation is extremely critical. Dyrance, save the captain, he's dying. Robin yelled, almost crying. Dylan's looked helpless and explained, he killed himself. It's really none of my business. Save him. Robin roared furiously. Dylan's plugged his ears and pretended not to hear. Maria calmly continued to flip through the book, ignoring the quarrel between the two, as if it had nothing to do with her. 10 seconds later, a strong airflow came from 100 meters away, causing the 3 of them to be startled. This is an extremely domineering aura, as if it can shock anyone around him. In an instant, they fell into a coma and lost all ability to resist. At the same moment, Yang Qing's laughter came from 100 meters away. Ha ha ha, Dylan's, pull me back. Dylan's right hand trembled, and as the space distorted, Yang Qing appeared on the deck. Robin was worried and anxious, hugged Yang Qing and cried nonstop. I thought, you. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Besides, Dylan's is watching too, he won't leave me alone. Yang Qing touched Robin's head and said with a smile. That might be the case. Dylan's curled his lips and said very hard. You're the worst. Robin said loudly, causing Dylan's to twitch the corners of his mouth, feeling that he was about to die. Ha 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 ha. Yang Qing let out a long smile, very happy. And you, worrying all day. Robin pointed at Yang Qing, causing the latter's laughter to stop abruptly. On the wooden boat, there was a screeching sound. 100 meters away, 4 sea kings were lying quietly on the sea, their eyes were white, and they had fainted. Time flies by, and in the blink of an eye, 6 years have passed. In the past 6 years, the Death God pirates, which once caused huge storms in the Great Waterway, have disappeared. This pirate group that shocked the pirates in the Great Channel with a very high reward as soon as they appeared, seemed to have disappeared, and never appeared in the eyes of the world again. The new officials took office, the emperor and the courtiers, the warring states period carried out a thorough cleaning of the entire system of the naval forces. Most of the chaotic elements of other forces were either eliminated or exiled, and the military power of the entire army was firmly grasped. After that, he began to embark on a huge plan. Shibukai Establishment Plan. With the beginning of the era of great pirates, more and more pirates have flocked to the great island. This is an era that is crazier than ever before. The words of the pirate king, Goldo Roger, before his death, made the whole world go crazy. Countless people joined the pirates. It put a lot of pressure on the sailors and made them devastated. In the end, the Navy headquarters is going to formulate a plan to use violence to control violence and use pirates to contain pirates. What the Navy needs to pay is some special powers, and they allow pirates to escape legally. Of course, this plan has only just begun and has not really been carried out yet. In the conference room of the Navy headquarters, warring states frowned at the documents on the table, his face extremely ugly. You mean, the red-haired Shanks, one of the 4 emperors, has left the New World? Sengoku looked at the lieutenant general in front of him, who nodded heavily. Can you determine their whereabouts? Warring States asked immediately. This level of powerhouse suddenly moves. This is an extraordinary thing, it makes him very stressed. There is no news yet. They seem to have coated the ship, dived from the bottom of the sea, and walked through the windless zone. Our New World spies have no news about them. The Lieutenant General shook his head, some have no choice. Damn it. Warring States punched the table, the other few are quiet, right? No, Lieutenant General said immediately. Warring States breathed a sigh of relief, and then murmured, the 7 Marshalseas plan, we must hurry up. What about the Caps? Lieutenant General Garp is coming to the headquarters from the East China Sea. Lieutenant General said again. Warring States nodded, waved his hand, and let everyone present leave, then put the documents in his hand into the lamb's mouth, and let the lamb chew them into pieces. At the critical juncture of the changing times, everything seems to be extremely chaotic. Chambord Archipelago, in the palace of the dragon people. Jace, come here soon, it's time to eat. A female voice sounded, and Jace, who was digging a hole in the courtyard to plant flowers, responded, and then pulled the young woman next to him, motioning for the latter to come too. Alice, let's have dinner together, Jace said. Jace was now nearly 10 years old, and he was handsome, almost like his older brother. Alice saw the former as if she saw. This chapter is not over, click on the next page to continue reading. Her former owner. Well, Jace, let's go together. Alice nodded. In the room, Alpha and Jace's mother had already sat down, and when the two arrived, they smiled and then motioned for people to serve. The meal took place quietly, and Alice got along very well with the Alpha family because of Yongqing. Also because of Alpha, the Monet family had no choice but to take revenge. For 6 years, they haven't heard from Yongqing. In their hearts, the free, dreamy, rebellious young boy should have died. Chapter 44 New Ability. Jace, you've grown up too. Jace's mother smiled. Well, Jess has grown up. In a few years, I will go and find my brother, so that you can rest assured. Jess nodded and said happily. Crack. As soon as these words fell, Alpha slammed the table and his face became extremely ugly. Don't mention that man again. He's dead, dead, dead. The loud voice, expressing Alpha's anger, made everyone on the table shudder. Jace stuck out his tongue and ate silently. His mother, quietly took Alpha's hand and gently reassured the former. She knew that Alpha felt uncomfortable. For 6 years, although her husband always smiled in front of her, whenever he turned his head, she could always see the sadness on his face through the mirror. For 6 years, he never gave up looking for that kid, but there was no news, and Alpha's heart sank quietly. Where is that person now? Is it dead or alive? They do not know. Also because of this incident, Alpha took action against the Monet family with anger within 6 years. Both of them are from heavenly dragons, possessing the same energy. When they fight, it is naturally impossible to fight face to face. The forces behind them start a cruel and ruthless duel. The silent battle, the bloodless war, made Monet rush with anger, and at the same time made Alpha's heart more and more stressed. His temper became more and more unstable, and the duration was violent. A lunch broke up, leaving only Jace and Alice. Silently finishing the meal in the bowl, Jace's eyes flashed with crystal light. Alice, in a while, I'm going to find my brother. Ah, but, little master, you are still young. Alice was shocked. So what? He is my brother. Whether he is alive or dead, I have to really get the news. Jace said firmly, exuding a unique momentum. Alice looked at Jace, as if she saw the boy who used to be. They are all equally unique, equally special. Somewhere in the windless belt where Junhai is connected to the Great Waterway. Are you ready, guys? A loud voice sounded, and then, 3 voices responded with excitement. Okay. Then let's go. Yes, Captain. In the windless zone, in the eyes of countless sea kings, a wooden boat rose tremblingly from the sea water, then slowly rose into the air, and began to fly. Hey, Lucifer, can you do it? Why is this boat rocking so hard? Dylan's looked at the rocking wooden boat, his face turning purple. No problem. Yangqing sat on the bow with a smile on his face, and then he shouted loudly, "Death pirates, set off, we will return to Junhai." Ah ah ah. A long series of terrified screams rang out, and the other 3 people on the boat were all terrified. Ah, Captain, I'd rather let Dylan's ability be teleported randomly. Your ability is too scary and dangerous. Robin was about to cry, crying loudly on the boat. Don't worry, my ability is just discovered, just let me get acquainted. Yangqing laughed without worrying at all. The wooden boat was swaying, and it seemed that it might fall into the sea below at any time. In the area below, huge sea kings looked up at the sky and opened their huge mouths, as if they were expecting them to fall quickly. This scene made the faces of the people on the boat even more ugly. Why don't you worry? The 3 people on the boat were all furious and could not wait to beat Yangqing, but looking at the sweat on the former's face, their hearts trembled even more. This guy seems very laborious. No, can't stand it. Haha, don't worry, there's no problem. Yangqing's words were a little reluctant, causing panic in the eyes of the 3 of them. This new ability, ahem, is really laborious. Hee hee. The next sentence made the other 3 even more nervous. Dyrance, if he fails, you can activate your abilities immediately. Moria said without hesitation, and Dylan's nodded heavily. At this moment, he also felt that the captain was a little unreliable. But to their relief afterwards, the wooden boat gradually stabilized. Yangqing let out a long laugh, which shows that he has become more adept at controlling the new abilities. After a full hour, the wooden boat came to Junhai without any risk. The tattered wooden boat 3 years ago seemed to be even more useless 3 years later. When Dylan set sail and was about to move forward, the wooden boat made a crunch sound, which changed the expressions of the 4 people on the boat. Afterwards, Yangqing came to the bow with a serious expression. A circle of light enveloped the entire ship, and then Yangqing shouted loudly, "Death pirates, go!" The wooden boat set sail, making a deep mark on the sea. Along the way, there are no pirates blocking it. In 6 years, the cosmopolitan family has undergone earth-shattering changes. After being swept away by a large number of marines, the number of pirates was much lower than before. And 6 years of changes have also made the 4 people on the boat change dramatically. The first is Yangqing, who is already 1.75 meters tall, handsome in appearance, with a confident gleam in his eyes, and a strong 8-pack abdomen. Secondly, Dylan's, he has become a lot stronger, and his age has reached his 20s. Finally, there are Robin and Moria, both of whom have become slim and beautiful girls. Standing there, it is a beautiful landscape. Standing on the bow, Yangqing. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Close your eyes and feel the surrounding sea. Dyrance, full right, heading toward the East Tri-States, where there's an island. Dylan's complied and filled the rudder with ease. Then, let the wooden boat move forward quickly with the help of the wind. Yangqing opened his eyes and took back his ability. He already felt that the wooden boat was just enough to carry them to the next sea area. And this is exactly the fruit ability that he has been unearthed, so that he can distinguish the location of the island through the smell in the air, and it is also because of his fruit ability. After 6 years of cultivation, Yangqing will finally train his devil fruit to a higher level before leaving on the last day, and new abilities will appear. And this ability is absolutely powerful. This new ability completely fits the name of the control fruit. Yangqing was excited by the power of this new ability. This fruit is worthy of being praised as a fruit that can become a god at the auction. Relying on the ability of this fruit, I don't even need to be domineering. I can compete with the people of the nature department, and even the top powerhouses. Even if they can't win, I'm already invincible. Chapter 45 Yangqing's eyes flickered, admiring the ability of this fruit. Not only that, but within 6 years, he even switched to the Beiming Divine Art, the secret book that originally could absorb people's inner strength. The ability of internal strength has become the ability to absorb the blood of others and enhance the ability of one's own body. There is no doubt that although this ability is harmful to others, it is absolutely powerful. At this moment, Yang Qing and others finally completed a heaven-defying transformation. 6 years ago, we survived. 6 years later, I want the whole world to see the power of my death pirates. The pain you gave me, I will repay you double. Monet, I won't let you go. Looking at the sky in the distance, Yang Qing's eyes flashed sharply. He is not the kind of bad and good person who repays his grievances with virtue. He is a good man in the world, and he should take revenge in a dashing manner. Being chased and killed without revenge is not his style. Of course, how to take revenge has to be carefully calculated. And the first thing Yang Qing has to do is to change a boat. The wooden boat was broken and could no longer carry them on. 3 hours later, the wooden boat slowly came to rest on the harbor on the island of Nice. The docking process was very slow. When the 4 of them heard 3 dull, click, sounds, their expressions changed, and they were all gloomy. After the wooden boat accompanied them for more than 6 years, it finally came to the end of his life. Dylan's, put away our pirate flag. Yang Qing covered her face, not wanting others to see her face, slowly stepped off the wooden boat, paused, and said in a low voice, "Then, send our partner on the road." "Yes," Dylan said solemnly, his expression very serious. Robin and Moria's eyes flickered, and they walked towards the wooden boat. When they stepped on the wooden boat, they finally couldn't bear it any longer and sobbed softly. The last one to disembark was Dylan's. When he folded the pirate flag neatly, and then stepped off the boat, there was a hum sound on the wooden boat, and it became torn apart, followed by countless dense shredding sounds. 3 seconds later, a gust of wind blew, and the wooden boat was reduced to the smallest particles and disappeared with the wind. You never had a name, but at this moment, I, Lucifer Saint, grant you eternal life. Your name, the God of Death. Yang Qing's eyes were sharp, looking at the empty sea in front of him, and said slowly and seriously. Then his right hand snapped his fingers, and with a snap sound, a light mask with a radius of 30 meters appeared, covering it. Inside the mask, an illusory wooden boat shadow appeared, swaying gently with the waves of the sea. After that, Yang Qing's right hand was slightly folded, and the illusory shadow gradually became smaller. When the death god's face disappeared, a small wooden boat appeared in his hand, exuding a crystal light. Is that him?" Dylan asked softly as he walked past. "It's him. He will always be with us until we become the strongest in the world." Yang Qing nodded heavily. Robin and Moria also passed by and became a lot happier. "Is it because of your brand new abilities that you can reunite him with us?" Dylan asked involuntarily as he walked towards the island. Yang Qing paused, then nodded. "Yes, this is the ability of the fruit." "It's very powerful," Dylan sighed and praised from the bottom of his heart. "Yes, very powerful. It suits me very well," Yang Qing said with a smile. The 4 of them walked towards the island. They haven't been out of the windless zone for 6 years. Naturally, they first found a lively restaurant to satisfy their cravings. Soon, Yang Qing saw a restaurant called Gourmet World. The door was very lively, his eyes lit up, and he got in. As soon as he entered the main hall, to his surprise, there were very few people in the restaurant. "Waiter," Yang Qing snapped her fingers and smiled. "Hello sir, how can I help you?" The waitress in black showed a sweet smile and said softly. "Why are there so few people in this restaurant? There are so many people outside," Yang Qing asked curiously, and the 3 Dylans behind them were also puzzled. "Sir, this is the case. The outside of the restaurant is for the commoners, while the inside is for some prestigious and powerful adults," the waiter said with a smile. "Oh," Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and his tone was playful. "Your restaurant has a very clear class division, so do you think we can sit here?" Waiter looked at the 4 of them carefully and shook his head. "Looking at your clothes, I'm afraid you can't afford it here. However, I can't tell your identities." The faces of the 3 Dylans sank. This is a show of contempt. Anyone who is seen with tinted glasses will feel uncomfortable. Dogs look down on people, and that's what they said. Ha ha. Yang Qing laughed mockingly, then said solemnly, "What if I told you that we are pirates?" The waiter's face changed, with panic. Before she could speak, Yang Qing and the four of them were already sitting in their seats, and then the young man shouted loudly, "Hurry up and serve the food, or labor and capital will smash your broken restaurant." Today, labor and management will be capricious once, and become a real pirate once again. Yang Qing's high-pitched scolding caused everyone in the restaurant to change color, with obvious panic. The pirates of this era have a clear deterrent effect, especially for the rich and commoners. In just 10 seconds, everyone in the restaurant ran out in cold sweat. The boss even came out from the backstage and came to the four-person face tremblingly. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Forward. Big people. Before he could finish speaking, Yang Qing waved to stop him. Just now, while Boss Yukong glanced at the four of them, he didn't recognize Yang Qing when he saw Yang Qing, but when he saw Dylan's and Nico Robin, his expression changed immediately. He clearly remembered that these two were members of the Stunned Death God Pirates 6 years ago. In other words, there is a 100% chance that this group of people is a vicious pirate or a big pirate, and he can't afford it at all. In less than 2 seconds, his whole body became tense. Yes, the boss nodded and walked down quickly to make arrangements. He simply couldn't afford to offend this group of people. "Ha ha, boss, you really look like a bad guy." As soon as the boss left, Dylan's laughed. "HMPH, do you think that all the pirates are good people? Naive. I'm the best of the bad guys, ha ha ha." Yang Qing smiled contemptuously and said sarcastically, and at the end, he laughed too. Chapter 46 New Ship. At the moment, the boss was hiding in the kitchen. He trembled slightly, and with sweat on his face, he dialed the phone bug in his hand. I'm sure. The boss trembled, shaking, there. After a few short sentences, the boss nervously walked to the back of the kitchen. "Hurry up, do it fast, hurry up, I don't want to be torn to shreds by these abominable pirates. All of you, hurry up for me. If it's too late, the shops of labor and capital will be smashed." When the chefs heard it, their hands trembled and moved quickly. They also heard that a group of vicious pirates came outside, and even the boss trembled in fright. I can't take it anymore. I have to find a chef as a crew member. I can't stand Dylan's endless fish." Yang Qing sighed, her mouth full of food. Robin and Malia laughed secretly, but Dylan's had a black line all over his face, and snapped the plate on the table towards Yang Qing. Boom! A cloud of air appeared at Yang Qing's fingertips, holding Dylan's plate against him, preventing the latter from advancing any further. Afterwards, Yang Qing ate the food in his mouth and said vaguely, "Don't mind Dylan's, what I'm saying is the truth. Damn it, you don't like to eat, you do it yourself, it's your job." Dylan's anger was ignited, and the two began to drool endlessly, while Robin and Moria took the opportunity to eat more some. An hour later, the four of them were full and threw a pile of golden Baileys on the table before walking out of the restaurant. Until the backs of the four disappeared completely, the boss and the others let out a heavy sigh, wiped their sweat and walked out. Finally, these uncles were sent out the door. "Boss, their money. Serve at this time." The clerk suddenly pointed to the table and reminded. The boss trotted over, and when he saw Bailey on the table, his eyes narrowed, and there was a light of thought in his eyes. "Pirate, or a vicious big pirate, eat my meal. Actually paid the bill. Quote. They tilde. The boss shook his head, not knowing what to say, and suddenly remembered that he clearly distinguished the commoners from the nobles, and he vaguely felt that he had done something wrong. "Go, move all the tables outside." 3 minutes later, the boss who walked to the counter suddenly said in a deep voice, giving in. The waiters were stunned. "Come on, what are you doing?" the boss yelled. The latter had a look of horror on his face and moved quickly. The boss looked outside, his face became a little complicated, and he murmured something. Such a big pirate will pay for meals, just like everyone else. As for my restaurant, it divides the commoners and nobles into two categories. It really makes me feel ashamed. From now on, my restaurant is open to anyone. Yang Qing and others did not know that after they left, the concept of the owner of this restaurant would change so much. Eating food and giving money is a fair deal. 2 hours later, they arrived at a shipyard. The choice of the ship is naturally the responsibility of Moria. Watching Molia and Robin, two beauties with extremely high IQs, facing a group of rough men not far away, Yang Qing and Dylan's instantly felt that the style of painting here had changed when they were bargaining coldly. The keel made of elm dragon wood, the original price is 10 million, plus the shipping fee of 2 million Bailey from the North Sea, plus the installation fee, 300,000 Bailey, other ship materials cost 5 million, various miscellaneous fees count you $1 million. In the end, the price of this light sailing vessel is. Quote. Moria's tone was indifferent, and she haggled the price in a serious manner, and Robin next to her casually pointed out the part of the ship in front of her. The two cooperated tacitly, making the face of the salesman on the side turn extremely blue. 18.3 million Baileys. Robin reported the number in the calculation, and the final word was settled. Dylan's accidentally crushed the wooden boat model he just bought, and a big black line appeared on Yang Qing's face. Together, these two little sisters had the demeanor of a strong woman, making them stunned. In the end, the two strong women successfully traded the lightweight longgrass miniature battleship called Jundian Treasure in the shipyard at a price of 18.5 million under the dark and numb face of the boss. After the transaction was over, Yang Qing and others purchased a bunch of food and filled the new boat. Among them, there are more than 20 pieces of each of the two beauties: spring, summer, autumn and winter, long skirts, short skirts, shoes, boots and other clothing, and there is also a mango orchard that Moria created herself. This boat is bigger than before. Planting mangoes is good for the fresh air. Facing the strange eyes of Yang Qing and Dylan's, Moria said calmly. Yang Qing and Dylan's looked at each other and were silent. When the few people were walking towards the boat in the dark weather, Dylan suddenly poked Yang Qing on the shoulder. Hi, Lucifer. Ah, Yang Qing asked suspiciously. A scholar, an archaeologist, his captain's brain is not broken, right? The four got on the boat, and Delis appeared on the mast and hung the pirate flag. The skeleton under the scythe immediately fluttered in the wind, exuding a sinister aura of convincing in all directions. Yang Qing sat on the bow of the boat, rubbed his right hand with his fingers, and activated his ability, covering the entire new boat, and then a boat-shaped phantom appeared and merged with the latter. Ship Genie, we meet again. Yes, it's a pleasure to be sailing with you again, thank you very much, Lucifer. Yang Qing smiled and nodded. New Reaper Re. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Set off, cut the sea, and beat the wind and waves. Chapter 47 Godlike Ability. The sea at night seemed calm, and the quiet sea breeze blew gently, bringing a touch of coolness to the four people on the Reaper, making them squinting their eyes comfortably. The candlelight was weak, bringing a trace of light to the Reaper. Moria was lying on the deck chair, looking at the deep sea, with a calm expression as if thinking about some huge problem. Robin, on the other hand, was sitting beside Moria, flipping through the books gently. His serious expression made Dylan's beside him in a daze. These two people really don't feel like I'm in the same world. Dylan sighed secretly in his heart. He could go crazy for practice. For example, now, he lifts dumbbells weighing 1,000 kilograms in each of his hands. Dripping down the deck, but unable to study day and night. Yang Qing, on the other hand, was sitting on the mast, humming and singing an unknown tune, holding a long western sword in his arms, and it was his turn to guard tonight. Hey, Lucifer, what exactly is your new ability? Dylan asked loudly while putting down the dumbbells and doing push-ups instead. Well, godlike ability, very powerful. Yang Qing closed his eyes and responded casually. Che, you say strong, then don't be chased and run around again. Dylan's cut and said in disbelief. After all, for the past 6 years, Yang Qing's fruit ability has not seen anything aggressive. Don't worry, I won't. From the top of the mast, Yang Qing's serious voice came, which made Dylan stunned for a moment, then he stopped talking and began to exercise. Time passed quickly, and the people on the Reaper began to fall asleep before they knew it. The two ladies had already entered the bedroom, and Dylan's had also entered his own room, leaving Yang Qing alone to sit on the mast, blowing the sea breeze quietly. Control the fruit. A person was half leaning on the top of the mast. Yang Qing's eyes suddenly brightened, his right palm trembled slightly, and a small circle of masks appeared with a boo sound, and then, the brilliance flashed in the aperture, and he could see clearly that everything in it is at his disposal, including the air. The territorial fruit, everything I touch in the mask is under my control. Is this your true power? There was an inexplicable light in Yang Qing's eyes. When he was about to leave that day, the weight of his body suddenly awakened inexplicably, and a large amount of information that seemed to be instinct began to flood into his mind. Afterwards, he felt that his digging of the devil fruit's ability had reached a new level. Because the fruit's ability is too high, do you have higher requirements on yourself? In other words, 6 years ago, I didn't even have the qualifications to come into contact with this ability. Yang Qing thought silently. After 6 years of practice, his fruit ability has covered an astonishing kilometer, and everything within a kilometer, he can look down like a god, and see everything in it. Clear. This terrifying ability can be said to be more domineering in a sense than the domineering. He can even control the enemy's next move by relying on the wind and the flow of air. And 6 years ago, he could put the fruit power on himself, which he called anti-control of himself. Today, he has divided his fruit ability into stages. In the first stage, pure assistance, like seeing the domineering look, with eyes like gods, can thoroughly understand all the movements within the control of his own mask. This is acting on the outside world, and acting on oneself is the ability to control everything about oneself. The second stage is the ability that he just awakened. He called it the attack phase of the devil fruit, and he also called it the godlike ability, because he can control all objects that his body touches. As long as he is within his own mask, he truly turned the place where he was based into the realm of God. This also acts on the outside world, and if it acts on himself, he has not tried it yet. Then, take this opportunity to try. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and a sound of boom enveloped him. The next moment, he seemed to be out of his body, and he could clearly observe everything in his body, and his mental will seemed to enter the absolute state. Rationality, God-like thinking. Can you enter a third perspective for your own body and easily respond to everything in the outside world? With thought in his eyes, Yang Qing understood. The difference between this ability and the first stage is that he does not need to control the body himself, and the fruit ability controls the body and can perform many extreme actions beyond the physical body. For example, Yang Qing's body trembled, but it maintained its original appearance and began to float. He flew up. This fruit is really against the sky. No wonder the price was raised to 1 billion. Who is the man in black robe? He seems to know this fruit very well. Yang Qing sighed in admiration, and then thought of the man in black robe. After that fight, the man in black robe disappeared. He also has no chance to meet the latter again. Now, what is lacking is the accumulation of time, and the accumulated flesh is strong and domineering. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and he carefully considered himself, without armed domineering, facing the natural system. After all, it's better, unless I make a sea-floor stone sword. Eyes lit up, Yang Qing decided to do this. But Halu stone is produced in small quantities and therefore more expensive, which is another nuisance. Shaking his head, he can only wait for the opportunity. In Junhai, there is nothing worth staying in. The next step is to go to the other 3 sea areas, and there are more by the way. Yang Qing pondered, recruit new recruits. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The crew. With only 4 people, the pirate ship is still too small. The problem of numbers is not enough to fulfill his dreams since childhood. While Yongqing was thinking about it, 2 warships in the distance were chasing after the knight. It was during the day that the boss called and notified the seamen of the Junhai branch. In the past 6 years, San Carlo, the head of the original Junhai branch, has been transferred back to him by his father. The people here have long since changed. The new first official is named Francis. He is known for his tough style and also has good strength. He is a major general of the headquarters and has mastered the existence of armed domineering. During the 3 years of his suppression, the pirates in Junhai have calmed down a lot. And when he heard that the Death God pirates reappeared, the tough Francis first only said a word. By the order of justice, arrest this vicious pirate group. Then, the colonel named Carlo set off with his soldiers in the direction of the Death God pirates. On the way, he encountered the patrolling Marines, a total of 2 naval warships, heading towards the Death God. Driving swaying. Oh. At this time, Yongqing, who was leaning on the mast, also woke up from his contemplation. He saw 2 warships coming from afar, and his eyes flashed. Chapter 48 The Godlike Man. The full moon is bright and clear, and the silver-white moonlight is lightly sprinkled on the sea surface. Under the moonlight, the occasionally jumping big fish looks like stars twinkling in the sky. Yongqing was leaning against the mast and didn't move, and the western longsword was casually held in his arms. His eyes moved slightly, and he could clearly see the 2 warships that were getting closer, and even the sailors who were constantly moving on their decks. At the forefront of the warship, 2 burly sailors stood there with solemn eyes, looking at the Death God from a distance. Fill the artillery, speed, it's only 300 meters away. The navy in front of the warship, with a calm expression, shouted loudly. The suppressed voice quickly spread on the warship, and the soldiers moved quickly. As the click sound continued to sound, the shells were loaded, and then aimed at the reaper that was getting closer and closer in the distance. Sir, the shells are filled. As long as they are close to the range, they can start firing immediately. The soldiers reported loudly on the boat, and Carlo in front nodded and waved his hand. Get ready and wait for the order. The 2 warships entered the current static state from the dynamic just now, appearing to be quiet. The warship slowly approached the reaper, and the distance was getting closer and closer. From 300 meters, to 200 meters, to the current 100 meters. The whole army is ready. Carlo gave an order. All the sailors looked solemn, waiting for the order, launch. At the moment when Carlo gave the order, Yongqing at the top of the mast suddenly blinked and turned to look there. When Carlo looked at Yongqing for a moment, for some reason, he suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart. With a good line of sight, he saw the half-reclining figure at the top of the mast. Without shouting or standing up in panic, he just stretched out his right hand calmly and casually. Boom! Then a slight voice sounded, and Carlo saw that with the Reaper as the center, a huge circle of light masks quickly spread and enveloped their 2 warships, making his face change immediately. At this moment, the gun barrels on the 2 warships all let out an angry roar. But what happened after that made the faces of the people on the warship change drastically. What's going on? The cannonball didn't explode, it fell. Also, what is this mask? Under the silent night sky, a panicked voice suddenly came from the warship, and a shadow suddenly rose in the hearts of the soldiers, because they found that their voices seemed to only be able to spread in a radius of 10 meters, and beyond this distance, they could not be transmitted. This strange scene made them shudder immediately. Devil fruit ability. A layer of cold sweat broke out on Carlo's back, and he also felt a huge strangeness descending on him. At this time, the young man sitting cross-legged at the top of the mast still didn't move. The index finger of his outstretched right hand suddenly trembled, stretched out, and his mouth moved slightly. Blast! Boom! The continuous explosions actually joined the defense of the headquarters ship and sounded in all directions, and there was a huge shaking from the warship, which made the soldiers panic. Carlo's face changed greatly, he could hear it clearly, the number of explosions was exactly the number they just made. In other words, these cannonballs were controlled by the man unknowingly. What the hell is this ability? Carlo heard that on the boat next to him, the lieutenant colonel had begun to change his face and cursed in horror. The next moment, they saw that the sea in front of them suddenly boiled, like boiling water, and countless bubbles were released from below, reacting violently. 3 seconds later, with the slight movement of the index finger of the boy who was leaning on the deck, a giant dragon with a length of 30 meters and a width of 5 meters rushed out of the sea with a roar. See, dragon made of sea water. Then, that man, he can control the sea. Run, run, you're going to die, it's horrible. Carlo's face changed greatly, and he finally knew the horror of that pirate ship at this moment. He was just one person, he didn't even move, but let his 2 warships have no power to fight back. The artillery can't get close, even the rifle will hit a barrier after tens of meters of bullets and fall into the sea, and then the bullet will go back on its original trajectory and hit the shooter. This bizarre and terrifying scene constantly infested his nerves, causing his brain to fall into a blank space. What should I do? What should I do? Carlo's pupils shrank violently, and he became confused. Without even getting close, the battle is over. The giant dragon slammed into the face, with a long body of 30 meters, and swept its tail towards the 2 warships. The strong force made countless sailors howl and fly into the air, and then fell heavily on the deck or in the sea. Just in an instant, the battle power of the large tracts has been destroyed. After one blow, the dragon turned into sea water and collapsed. Then a tsunami appeared on the sea, and it slammed towards the 2 warships overwhelmingly, causing the sailors to scream in horror, and despair and fear drowned here. 3 minutes later, the Reaper went farther and farther, leaving only the wreckage of 2 warships on the sea, and the confused eyes of countless sailors. Then, that man. Carlo trembled all over, completely overwhelmed by fear. For a while, all that remained in his mind was the figure half leaning against the top of the mast, holding a long western sword in his arms. That man's expression was always so calm, his eyes were like the sea, tolerant of everything, and he seemed to have everything under control. Who is he? When the officers and soldiers on the 2 warships were rescued the next day, Carlo finally knew the identity of the man. His eyes narrowed violently. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The whole body is still in fear. That godlike ability made him tremble in the bottom of his heart. Basically, there is absolutely no way to fight it. Captain of the Death Pirates, Lucifer. On a reward order, the head of the young man from last night was quietly pasted on it, and Carlo's fists felt clenched. This man has only 50 million. Navy headquarters, are you kidding me? That terrifying devil fruit ability can actually control the sea, and there are all kinds of unknown abilities, but there are only 50 million. Carlo couldn't help but be full of anger in his heart. This is simply cheating. At noon, Francis came to the hospital to visit Carlo with a serious expression. What happened? 2 warships, a colonel and a lieutenant colonel, couldn't manage the pirate ship. Even if they couldn't win, it shouldn't be so miserable. So, what the hell is going on with this hellish look? Francis's voice was full of doubts and wonder. There is only one man, a man like a god. Carlo trembled and said softly. Chapter 49 New Bounty. Francis's eyes shrank, and his heart became solemn. He knew about Carlo's abilities. As a colonel of the Navy, even if it was just a distributed colonel, even if he couldn't deal with the pirate group with only 4 people, it would definitely not be so miserable. So, the only problem is that pirate ship, which is really terrifying. The pirate group that is close to 200 million, Junhai, is really difficult to deal with them. Francis understood. 6 years ago, this pirate group had reached 200 million. After 6 years, no one knows how powerful they are. It was his mistake to let Carlo attack. Fortunately, most of those Marines were seriously injured and few died, which made him feel less ashamed. I am afraid that such a vicious element can only be attacked by the Navy headquarters. Francis finally decided, and after comforting Carlo, who obviously had a faint in his heart, he turned around and left the hospital, and then dialed the phone bug of the Marine Corps. The Navy Headquarters, the first department in Junhai, please speak. The formatted voice sounded. Francis cleared his throat and began to report. It was scheduled last night. In the Sifros waters of Junhai, our army dispatched 2 warships to fight against the Death God pirates. The result of the battle was that our army's 2 warships, a colonel and a lieutenant colonel, were annihilated. The enemy army, the Death God pirates, left safely, unscathed. So, I, Major General Francis, ask for support from the headquarters to arrest this pirate group. The Death God pirates. The Death God pirates 6 years ago. The voice from the headquarters was obviously a little curious and unbelievable. A pirate group that disappeared for 6 years has reappeared today. Yes, and according to the existing information, they have become stronger. Francis said solemnly. The Marine Corps headquarters suddenly fell into silence. 3 minutes later, the phone worm rang again, but this time it was obviously a different person. Hey, Major General Francis, I'm the Warring States period. Marshal. Francis was shocked. It turned out to be the Marshal of the Warring States period. About the information and intelligence of the Death God pirates, you will make a document and send it to the headquarters later. Warring States said calmly. Also, the Junhai branch should not act rashly and wait for the support of the headquarters. This pirate group is not easy. The words of the Warring States period shocked Francis, and then he responded. The pirate ship, which is valued by the headquarters, must not be so simple. It seems that his previous actions were indeed too rash. Yes. Francis hung up the phone, then thought silently for a while before leaving. The Navy headquarters, the Warring States period, was in a state of turmoil. There were indeed a lot of things going on recently. Looking at the thick stack of documents on the table, his forehead had turned into a word for Sichuan. The 3 generals have been dispatched. Who can use them now? This pirate group had great strength 6 years ago, and even Qingzi didn't pay attention to them for a while. At this time, I'm afraid it will be more difficult to deal with. Can I just give up first? I'm really helpless. I hope there won't be too much trouble. After thinking about it carefully, he reluctantly said that the information on the table was stuffed into Xiaoyang's mouth. Let's pretend he didn't see this information. He is powerful and has a background of Tianlong people. He really has a headache. And this kid's goal seems to be the main needle. Let that group of people have a headache. A day later, a new bounty appeared again. The captain of the Death Pirates, Lucifer, nicknamed Death, has a bounty of 100 million. Deputy captain of the Death God Pirates, Dylan's, nicknamed Ghost, with a bounty of 90 million. Reaper Pirates, archaeologist, Nico Robin, bounty, 79 million. Death Pirates, ship doctor, Moria, bounty, 20 million. This time, all 4 of them have a bounty. Except for Nico Robin's amount remaining unchanged, Lucifer and Dylan's amount has both increased. This can be considered that the Warring States finally got what he wanted. 6 years ago, he proposed to offer a reward of 100 million to Lucifer. After all, such people with different opinions are extremely dangerous. The bounty was spread out quickly, and the new bounty immediately shocked most people. The first person who got the information was Alpha in the Tianlongren Palace. He looked at the casual, handsome young man on the reward order. The expression on his face was anger and happiness, and it was very complicated. This young man was holding a slender western long sword in his arms, looking very tolerant. The bounty, 100 million. Alpha read out the number in shock, looking deeply at the young man on the bounty. How strong is this kid? My lord's son, he is really excellent. The man in black also had a look of horror on his face, looking at the reward order on the table, and exclaiming sincerely. He clearly knew that this reward amount, even in the first half of the great route where the strong gathered, was considered a leader. In other words, the man with monstrous energy in front of him, his son, possesses unimaginable super strength. In Monet's courtyard, the Tianlong man who had been furious all the time had a rather ugly expression at the moment. With a bounty of 100 million, he naturally knew what it meant. With the strength in his hands, I am afraid that there is no way to take a pirate of this level. This is a gap in strength that cannot be changed. I can't help this kid in the future. Damn him, how could he be so powerful? Angrily clenching his fists, Monet's face was ashen, and finally, he squeezed a word out of his mouth. I won't give up just like that. You must die, you must die. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Monet's resentment accumulated over time, and the unforgettable hatred made him go crazy. He couldn't bear the death of his own child. It was a feud of bereavement that could never go away. In Shigu Town, there was naturally another lively celebration. After 6 years, they thought those few people had disappeared, but they did not expect to appear again, and they seemed to be stronger. People who know Yangqing and others are happy or angry when they hear their news. It's not enough. At this moment, the Reaper was driving in Junhai. His direction was very clear, and he went straight towards the upside-down mountain. If the pirates of the Four Seas want to enter the Great Waterway, they will pass the upside-down mountain. Here, the Four Seas have completed a common, from 4 different roads to converge in everything, and then enter the Great Waterway. And Yangqing and others, at this moment, are thinking like this. They do not enter the Great Waterway. When the Reaper is traveling on the upside-down mountain and sees the passages of other sea areas, they will go backwards and enter other sea areas. The Reaper was driving quietly. According to Moria, there were only 3 days left to travel to Upside Down Mountain. Their place was originally the closest sea area to Upside Down Mountain. Well, Captain, didn't anything happen to your guard last night? Dillons got up early in the morning, started exercising, and asked casually. No, I'm going to rest. Yangqing waved his hand and answered casually, then entered the room. Chapter 50_. The Death God pirates approached the pirate ship on the right side at a very fast speed. Dillons turned the rudder gently and rowed towards the left point of the pirate group ahead. The 2 ships were quickly on the same level, and the people on board looked at each other. The crew of the Death pirate ship, with a casual look on their faces, passed the huge pirate ship in front of them. On the right side of the pirate ship, the crew members were confused. Under the command of the captain, they were also quiet and did not make any sound. Only their captain, his whole body trembled slightly, and the layers of cold sweat came out of his body. He stared nervously at anyone on the pirate ship opposite. When he saw Yangqing, his heart beat violently. That's right, it's him. Sure enough, it's him, that posture, that western sword, and that unrestrained expression on his face. It's him, the god of death Lucifer with a bounty of 100 million. The captain trembled all over and looked back. He saw Nico Robin flipping a book, and trembled again. Son of the devil, Nico Robin. Ghost Dillons. Ship Doctor, Mariah. The captain looked one by one, and his heart fell into a huge shock. It is this group of people. There are only 4 people, but the bounty has far exceeded 200 million. The Reaper slowly overtook them, leaving only a back in the end. At this moment, the captain let out a long breath and turned his head to face the doubts on the faces of the crew members. He didn't say anything, just took out 4 reward orders from his arms and threw them to the crew at the forefront. You guys, see for yourself. The crew members looked at each other, and when they opened the reward orders one by one, and compared with the crew members on the ship in their minds, these pirates couldn't help shaking their whole bodies. Some people even fell to the ground with their legs weak. They are actually the Death God pirates. The woman with the lowest bounty is even higher than the boss. Big pirates, they are big pirates. The crew members were stunned and muttered to themselves, their hearts filled with huge shock. They couldn't help but remember that if the boss had told them just now, I'm afraid they would have collapsed to the ground at the moment, unable to even move. On the Reaper, the expressions of the 4 of them became solemn. Getting closer and closer to Upside Down Mountain, they saw that the pirate ship in front had already rushed into the river channel of Upside Down Mountain by taking advantage of the updraft, and then the speed suddenly increased, and there were bursts of screams from the boat. Dillons, fix the rudder. Moria, Robin, hold on to the boat, don't be thrown out. Yang Qing ordered solemnly, I'll take care of other things. Yes, Captain, cried the crew. 3 minutes later, the Reaper approached the upside-down mountain with only 10 meters remaining. At this moment, the ship shook, the sails swelled suddenly, and the speed of the ship suddenly tripled. The huge inertia made the whole ship's body tremble. Afterwards, Yang Qing, who was sitting on the bow, saw that the Reaper really went upstream, slanting towards the sky. Ah! Yang Qing felt very excited after making a series of screams. Just like the roller coaster in the previous life, the heart rate accelerated and the blood boiled. Dylan's, Robin, and Moria also roared happily. This thrill of rushing towards the sky made everyone feel refreshed. To the sky, fly, Reaper! Yang Qing roared loudly, and the death god roared. The speed suddenly increased again, and the faster wind blew toward their cheeks, making the 4 people scream even louder. Captain, look, they're faster than us. There was a shout from the front, and Yang Qing saw the pirate ship before. The Reaper was very fast, approaching the ship in front of it at extreme speed. This group of ignorant boys actually dare to go to the Great Waterway. Did they die? Go, it's also the role of courting death. Captain, why don't we beat them up now and let them go back to Junhai? The voice in front came clearly, causing Yang Qing to raise his eyebrows, and a gloomy light flashed in his eyes. Dylan's expression also darkened. Who are they? For the death god pirates, it's okay not to provoke others, but there are still people who dare to mock them. Captain, Dylan stretched out his hand and was about to do it, but was stopped by Yang Qing's wave. Just right, try my new ability. Dylan stopped when he heard what Yang Qing said. The 2 ships were getting closer and closer, and when they were only 30 meters away from each other, Yang Qing reached out with his right hand, snapped his fingers with a pop, and a circle of masks quickly wrapped the other's pirate ship. Then, Yang Qing's fingers trembled slightly. The next moment, there were bursts of terrified shouts from the pirate ship ahead. Ah! Help! Help! My body is out of control. I can't control my body. Help! There are devils! There are devils! The pirates cried out one by one, and with a terrified expression, they walked to the edge of the boat, and then jumped down suddenly. Moreover, in the warehouse of this ship, large pieces of gold and silver treasures contained in boxes were also pulled by an invisible force at this moment and flew towards the outside. A minute later, all the treasures were neatly placed on Yang Qing's boat. The Reaper, on the other hand, has surpassed that unknown pirate group by a large margin. Faced with the horrified expressions of all the pirates, Yang Qing just left a light sentence. Just a little punishment. Go back to Junhai to continue your studies. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. With a boom, the shells on the pirate ship suddenly exploded by themselves, causing the whole ship to shake violently, and it started to sink downward. In the rear, the pirates who were upstream saw this scene and swallowed their saliva in horror. They couldn't help but recall that if they had opened their mouths just now, their fate would undoubtedly be no different from these people. The grim Reaper rides the wind and waves against the current. The 4 people above let the sea wind blow their black hair, with excited expressions on their faces. Soon, they will reach the top, and they can look down on the terracotta continent and see the whole world. 3 minutes later, as the 4 of them shouted, the Reaper rushed into the sky and escaped the channel of the upside-down mountain. At this moment, the 4 of them clearly saw everything about Upside-Down Mountain, and the vast and boundless sea in front of them. It was divided into several lines, running through countless points, but they all had only one end point. On both sides and around, there are 4 long and far-reaching rivers from bottom to top. At this moment, in one of the other 3 rivers, a pirate boat was going upstream. Above it was a 12-year-old boy, half leaning against the wall of the ship, with gloomy eyes, holding a western sword in his arms, wearing a winter fur hat with leopard spots on his head, black bags on his eyes, and 2 ears on his ears. Small gold earrings, casual long sleeves with a hood, dark blue trousers with a speckled pattern. Luo, Your lord called you. At this moment, a deep voice called out. The young man was stunned for a moment, then his eyes flashed and he stood up slightly. Chapter 51 Doflamingo's Dread. This pirate ship has a medium-sized scale, and at this moment, it is taking advantage of the upward trend to quickly head towards the top of the upside-down mountain. The people on the boat seemed a little quiet, and Duo Shu didn't say a word. Sitting upright, the boat shook violently, but the people on it were motionless and calm. The young man named Luo got up and walked on the swaying boat, looking crooked, but his expression didn't change, he just moved forward. After a while, the boy entered a bedroom. Sir. Bending slightly, Luo said with an expressionless salute. Hee, Luo, how has your practice been recently? I see that you can't even stand firm, you're still very bad. The person in the bedroom smiled grimly. You can't do it like this. Luo was expressionless, did not answer, just stood silently. With your strength, you can't enter the great waterway. The voice continued to ring, but Luo was indifferent. Seeing Luo's appearance, the person who spoke felt a little boring, a coldness flashed in his eyes, and then chuckled. Come out with me and see this upside-down mountain scenery. But, it's pretty good. After speaking, the figure stood up on its own, then walked out of the shadows and entered the light, revealing its appearance. The blonde hair was very dazzling in the sun, wearing sunglasses, a pink feather coat and cropped trousers, and the toes on the feet were like a sharp sword. He always had a grim smile on his face, looking terrifying. The boat was shaking, but this man walked out of the room very quickly. Luo Yao followed the former out of the room, without saying a word, looking very determined. It's coming soon. An ambitious smile appeared on the face of the figure, and he sighed. He spread his hands, as if embracing the world. Do you hear me? The times are calling me. Ha 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 ha. The figure has a morbid madness, and he shows a kind of persistence and ambition for dreams and goals. The ship moved forward rapidly, and the figure's feathered coat was shaken constantly. He stretched out his hands and let the wind blow on his face, looking very excited. Luo, will you witness the birth of an emperor on the great waterway next? Is this a very exciting thing? Ha 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 ha. The ship jumped out suddenly, has traveled to the end, and rushed out of the channel. The figure couldn't help but let out a weird cry. The call of the times is getting closer. The next moment, everyone on the boat was taken aback. They saw that at the same moment they rushed into the sky, a boat jumped up from other directions. At this moment, the distance between the two ships was only 10 meters. The crew members on the boat looked at each other, and they saw that on the opposite boat, a young man at the bow was leaning halfway against the wall of the boat, holding a western sword in his arms. Some are similar. Ha ha, Luo, did you see that? That person really looks like you. The figure shouted loudly, and Luo also saw that person at the same time, and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. The next second, the figure trembled with his fingers. On the Reaper, Dylan's expression suddenly changed, and his killing intent was soaring. He felt a tiny silk thread winding towards him, and the people on the ship started. Captain! Dylan's shouted, his whole body trembled, and the power of space trembled, cutting off the tiny silk thread. Yang Qing's eyes turned cold as he looked at the opponent who was getting closer and closer to his ship. He rubbed the fingers of his right hand and made a pop sound. With the sound of pop, a circle of light quickly enveloped him for 30 meters. Scrub. A small voice sounded, and all the thin threads on the boat towards Moria and Robin were crushed into powder. The face of the figure in the pink feather coat changed, and a light flashed in his eyes. Some strength. Brother Doflamming. Yang Qing's right index finger bent slightly from the icy voice on the opposite boat. You are really courting death. Doflamingo's face changed. He felt the air on his ship becoming thinner, the space began to freeze, and there was a feeling that nothing was out of control, which made his heart dignified. But in the next moment, the two ships crossed each other and were about to pass by. You're lucky. Yang Qing's face was a little helpless, and when he moved his index finger, the imprisoning force disappeared, and the two ships quickly staggered away. Brother Doflamingo was relieved, and his eyes narrowed tightly. That young man gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. Who is he? Dover. At this moment, Pika screamed in a shrill voice behind him. Doflamingo immediately turned around, and the sight made his eyes shrink immediately. Luo is gone. The expressionless child disappeared. Brother Doflamingo could not help clenching his fists. His face turned extremely cold. Damn, check it out for me and find out the identity of that team of pirates, Doflamingo said furiously. Soon, Diamante stepped forward with a dignified face, and said gloomily, Dover, that team is not easy to mess with. Oh, Doflamingo's face showed a trace of doubt, and he looked at the reward order in Diamante's hand. At first glance, his pupils contracted violently. 100 million. There is no doubt that the slack, Luo-like man was depicted on the reward order, but the long string of zeros below it was so dazzling. Death Pirates. Doflamingo spit out these 5 words solemnly. Yes. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. You left a deep impression in the heart of the lazy young man half holding the western long sword in his arms. On the Reaper Pirates. When Dylan saw a child suddenly appearing on the boat, he couldn't help but covered his forehead, and he didn't even care about the death god, which was falling down quickly. Then, my dear captain, can you tell me where this child is from? Is it? Yeah, what a gloomy kid, he looks grumpy, Robin said in surprise. Luo pursed his lips tightly, looking at the 4 weirdos who suddenly appeared in front of him, feeling mad in his heart. Why did he suddenly come here from Doflamingo's fleet? Who are these 4 people? Moria adjusted her glasses, looked at Luo quietly, and then said wisely, it seems that this is our new partner. A black line appeared on Luo's face. What crew member? Did he agree? Can you please stop making assertions? Of course, these are all roars in his heart, and he is expressionless and calm on the surface. This is the experience he has gained by himself for so many years, and he should not express his own thoughts on his face at any time. Moria is right, this child will be our crew in the future. With a casual smile on his face, young Ching half leaned against the wall of the boat and said lazily. Chapter 52 New Brothers. The captain's words completely solved the doubts of the other 3. Dylan's also put aside his previous question and turned to look at Luo. Then let me introduce you, newcomer. I don't think I've agreed to join you yet. Luo finally couldn't help it. He exploded when these people made their own decisions. Yang Qing raised his eyebrows, and controlled the death god to float in the air, sticking to the airflow upstream from below, heading towards the sea below, ignoring Luo's words. Rookie, don't say it's useless. The captain said you joined, then you have no choice. Quickly introduce yourself. Bing, yeah, Robin. Yes, Robin knows it best, you have no choice, you should introduce yourself obediently. Robin blinked, said innocently, and glanced at Yang Qing from the corner of his eye. This man really doesn't give anyone a chance to choose. I refuse to join you, Luo said bluntly, without hesitation. A trace of anger appeared on Dylan's face. He felt that he was underestimated, and the child was not pleasing to the eye for a moment. Hello, kid, do you know what you're talking about? Dylan showed his fist. Luo glanced at him lightly, and said hard, I said, I refuse to join. In addition, let me tell you, the team of pirates just now has a lot of background, and you are in big trouble. Quote. Oh, Yang Qing had a smile on her face and raised her eyebrows before turning her head to Luo. Boy, you know what? In my life, I'm not afraid of trouble. Luo's eyes shrank. If I remember correctly, it was this man who transferred him from that ship to this ship. Who is this person who even Doflamingo can't stop? So, do you want to take revenge? Yang Qing smiled and said lightly. Luo's face changed greatly, staring at Yang Qing. Who are you? If you want revenge, join us. Yang Qing said casually. The fingers of his right hand trembled slightly, and the death god speeded up, getting closer and closer to the sea below. Luo's expression began to change violently. and it was somewhat uncertain. At this moment, he felt that the man in front of him was unfathomable, and there was a feeling even more terrifying than Doflamingo. Then, from today onwards, you are the ship's doctor, our surgical ship's doctor. Yang Qing smiled and looked at Moria. Moria, you are in charge of internal medicine. Moria nodded and looked at Luo strangely. Didn't expect this kid to be a doctor. But how did the captain see it? Luo finally nodded. The understated expression of the man in front of him and the lazy look made him feel inexplicably safe. This captain, it seems to be a good choice. At least, he did not smell the bloodthirsty and brutal smell of the latter, which was the smell of Doflamingo. The Grim Reaper floated downwards rapidly. When it left the upside-down mountain, Yang Qing's right hand trembled, the mask was removed, and the ship landed on the sea smoothly. This is Beihai. Dylan's held the rudder in his hand, and then shouted to Luo with a dark face, "Rookie, you go to prepare food, this is a test for you." Luo turned his head with a stinky face and ignored Dylan's. 10 seconds later, he walked towards the kitchen. He was also a little hungry. Durance. Yang Qing leaned against the bow of the boat, and suddenly called out in a soft voice. After Dylan's responded, he said again, "In the future, Luo's physical skills will be taught by you, and swordsmanship will be handed over to you." Me. Ah. Dylan's let out a long voice and said with some disgust, "Isn't it true, you have to teach him to practice?" He said he wanted to avenge him. Yang Qing said casually, then his eyes narrowed and he said seriously, "Also, he is already our brother." Dylan's eyes flashed and he nodded, he understood. After half an hour, everyone gathered on the deck with each other. Sit in a circle around the rich things in the middle. The food smelled greedy, and there was a big bottle of rum in front of everyone. The newcomer is here today, so, celebrate. Yang Qing sat cross-legged on the deck with a smile on his face, twisted the lid of the rum, and poured it down his throat proudly. Dylan's shouted loudly, and also opened the lid and poured it into his mouth unceremoniously. After that, Robin smiled and drank it into her stomach. The irritating smell made her cough continuously, but her face was full of smiles. Moria had a pale face and took a sip. "It's your turn, kid, get on our boat, and from now on, you're brothers." Dylan's grabbed the rum in front of Luo, paused heavily, and said loudly. Luo was stunned, but Dylan's became impatient, helped him unscrew the bottle of wine, and then bluntly stuffed it into Luo's mouth and poured it directly, causing Luo to burst into tears immediately. Ha 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 ha. Seeing Luo's tragic appearance, Yang Qing laughed out loud, and Robin and Mariah also laughed out loud. Dylan's, Luo will kill you, ha ha ha. Robin laughed and burst into tears. I'm afraid of him, Dylan said disdainfully, big man, mother-in-laws. At this moment, Luo, who was slowing down, shouted, "Ah, you bastard, I'm going to kill you." The two simply fought together. Yang Qing and the three just laughed and watched the play without stopping. 10 minutes later, the two sat in front of the food with bruised noses and bruised faces, looking at each other's eyes spitting fire. Luo, introduce yourself, Yang Qing said casually. Telfega di, Wadi. This chapter is not over, click on the next page to continue reading. Luo, just call me Luo. Luo rubbed his sore eyes. Moria handed him an ice pack. Luo Yi was stunned, then thanked softly, and put it on his face, feeling much more comfortable. Moria, I want it too. This kid is too ruthless. You can give me a slap in the face. Dylan shouted, causing Robin to laugh again. No, Moria said coldly, and gently put the remaining ice packs in her small suitcase. The four people present seemed to hear the sound of a broken heart and laughed secretly. Seeing this scene, Luo also showed a smile on his face, which affected the wound, and immediately twisted it, becoming a little funny. I'm Lucifer, hello, we will live together in the future. Yang Qing said with a smile. I'm Moria, hello, Luo. Moria nodded. My name is Robin, Luo, hello, let's fight together. Robin said happily, raising his little fist, very cute. Dylan's, Brat, I'll let you remember me in the future. Hiss, it hurts. Dylan said through gritted teeth. Yang Qing saw everyone introduce themselves to each other, clapped their hands, and laughed loudly. Then, our banquet has begun. Dylan's, let's sing a song first, welcome our new partner. Dylan's was stunned for a moment, glared at Luo fiercely, and Luo rudely replied, and then, the super ugly singing resounded on the Reaper, and the giggle of Robin and Moria kept ringing. Luo's face changed, looking at Dylan's who was enduring the pain and sang to welcome him, with something else in his eyes. Chapter 53 Luck is Smiling. Dylan's song resounded on the Reaper, facing the sea breeze. The Reaper set sail at a very fast speed. They laughed and sang all the way. Celebrate the new crew and be happy with the new buddies. Yo ho ho ho. As the familiar melody picked up the tune, the crew sang binks, wine, gulps and smiles on their faces. A good atmosphere prevailed on this pirate ship, and the crew sang loudly. Luo and Dylan's, who seemed to be incompatible by nature, were also blushing and thick-necked at this time, and they hugged each other and sang the song of a pirate. When the sun goes down and disappears at sea level, everyone snored and fell asleep, and when they woke up the next day, the Reaper was already leaning on an island. Yang Qing rubbed his eyes, grabbed the western long sword beside him, and walked towards the bow. He drank a bit too much yesterday, and until now, his mind still aches. Walking slowly to the bow, Yang Qing just woke up and felt much more comfortable when the gentle sea breeze blew. Where is this place? Yang Qing couldn't help but be stunned when he came to the bow. The bow of the boat was close to the coast, and Yang Qing looked into the island, but it was very lively. But the situation on this island surprised him. Am I here at the concentration of gamblers? Yang Qing said speechlessly. Not far from the coast, this island is a small town. The town is not big, but it is very lively. A group of big men shouted that their faces were red and their necks were thick, and their eyes were red. They were really betting. That's right, it's a bet. Big, big, big. Small, small, small. If you win this one, the labor and capital will go home. Mad, you can't win if you don't believe it. There were shouts everywhere, and it was simply a gathering place for a group of gamblers. In the town on the island, everyone is betting that there is an entertainment venue almost every 10 meters, and there is nothing else. It seems that the ocean current has brought us to Segra's Island in the North Sea. Luo pressed his temples and came behind Yang Qing. The famous betting island. Moria also got up. Dylan's also woke up at this time. His whole body trembled. He appeared under Yang Qing's feet, half lying looking at the island. He said with interest, "You can play, Robin." Robin's face darkened. "Don't think about it if you don't have money." Everyone on the boat laughed, and Luo naturally didn't miss the opportunity to hit his opponent at this time. If you play, you can't win. Stinky boy, what did you say? Dylan's face became stinky, and he stood up suddenly. Since you're here, let's go in and have a look. Yang Qing didn't care that the two started to fight again, and got off the boat on his own, followed by Robin and Mariah. In the end, Dylan's chose to stay and watch the boat, because the injury on his face had not recovered, and his eyes were blue and purple, and he could not go out to meet people, which made him grit his teeth with hatred. Luo smiled smugly, leaving her with a back. Stinky boy, wait, when labor and capital teach you physical skills, it will make you comfortable. Dylan said fiercely, and then his body trembled. He came to the top of the mast, and half leaned to start to rest. Yang Qing and his party gathered together, and the closer they got, the more they felt the excitement on the island. The first time I came to this kind of place, everyone craned their necks and watched everything here curiously. They saw that on this island, there are all kinds of gambling techniques, such as gold flower, mahjong, big wheel, everything. And there are all kinds of people here, pirates, sailors, civilians, businessmen, all gathered here. Luo, do you want to play 2 games? Yang Qing said with a smile. Luo Yi was taken aback and shook his head. I won't do this. I'm going to play. Robin excitedly ran to a table, and then saw others put Bailey in a small print, and she was excited to bet. Yang Qing and the others followed Robin closely, just to see the result. But at this moment, a figure came in, stopped Robin who was about to bet, and said with a smile. "No, no, 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 lady, you should vote for this." Then he took Robin's hand and put Bailey on the big print. Robin couldn't help but show anger on his face and turned his head. "What are you doing?" "I want to be small." "Big, that's right. You have to trust me, ma'am. Today is my lucky day." Robin was speechless. Where did this weirdo come from? Yang Qing and the others looked at the person who appeared out of nowhere, and saw that he was wearing a cowboy hat, a dark blue jacket, jeans, and cowboy boots, dressed as a Western cowboy. Standing there, with a smile on his face, he looked very dignified. This person. Luo's eyes narrowed and he saw something different. He grabbed the Western sword with his right hand, but at the next moment, Yang Qing held down his long sword and shook his head. "Watch quietly." Luo's eyes flashed, he nodded, and let go of the sword in his hand. Moria looked strangely at this Western cowboy who suddenly appeared, and seemed a little curious too. The next moment, the croupier lifted the lid, revealing the sieve on the gaming table, and a large group of people looked disappointed and disappointed, only Robin looked surprised. 4, 5, 6, big. It's really big. Robin turned to look at the cowboy, a little curious. "I said, today is my lucky day," cowboy said with a smile. Who are you?" Robin said. "You can call me Drizzt, they all call me the Card Master." Drizzt introduced himself with a smile. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Drizzt. Robin wondered, she hadn't heard the name before. Yang Qing and others also looked at each other. They had never heard of the name, but they always felt that this person was very strange. At this time, the people around who heard Drizzt's voice also saw Drizzt dressed in cowboy clothes, and immediately took a breath of air, and then quickly backed away. "Yes, Drizzt, it's him, the Card Master. Hurry up, stay away from him, don't get involved. It's that man, that horrible man." In just 10 seconds, the surroundings of everyone were already empty. Luo squinted, stepped forward, stood beside Robin, looked at Drizzt and said slowly, "They seem to be afraid of you. Those who obey me will prosper, those who oppose me will perish. This is God's will, they." Drizzt raised his eyebrows and said softly, "It's just that they don't understand me." Luo didn't understand. But the next moment, a large group of men dressed in black with hideous faces rushed up, pointing at Trista at the head, and shouting loudly, "It's him, hack him to death for me." Drizzt didn't panic when he saw this scene, he just glanced at Yang Qing and the others unexpectedly, and then murmured, "Fate, it has been twisted." With a handful of his right hand, a card appeared in his hand, then looked at the team of men in black, and said with a smile. "Luck is smiling." Chapter 54 Pop. Yang Qing saw the man in black quickly approaching, snapped his fingers, and with a boo sound, Luo and Robin were then moved to him by him. "Watch quietly." Smiling, Yang Qing said softly. In the field, the people in black quickly surrounded Drizzt, breathing heavily, holding machetes in their hands. They stared nervously at the smiling cowboy in the field. "Everything is in the card." Drizzt smiled lightly, and then threw the card in his hand. Everyone in the field clearly saw that the moment the card was thrown out and fell to the ground, a scarlet light circle shone, just like the scene when the cards were dealt. Layers of cards appeared, paving the way for Trace. Special square 10 meters. Victor, live. Loser, die. Drizzt said with a smile, and then the men in black who surrounded him each had an extra card in their hands. They seemed to have forgotten their purpose, and were momentarily stunned by the magic and strangeness, and then involuntarily looked at the cards in their hands. At the same time, Drizzt showed his cards. "It seems that no one has a bigger hand than me. Luck is smiling." Drizzt smiled, put away his cards, and left. The moment he left, all the people who got the cards in the field fell to the ground with frightened faces, and gradually lost their breath. This scene made Robin take a deep breath, Luo's eyes flashed a dignified light, while Yang Qing was thoughtful. "This person is so weird," Robin said with some fear. "Yes, devil fruit ability." Luo nodded solemnly. "It should be." Yang Qing's eyes flashed and he nodded lightly. Afterwards, they continued to turn around on Segras Road. 3 hours later, Luo was carrying a large package with an extremely ugly expression on his face. He looked at Yang Qing, Robin, and Moria, who were all relaxed beside him. Extremely unbalanced. "Why me? I'm still a child," Luo yelled. "It's good for young people to exercise more," Yang Qing explained with a smile, very polite and polite. "Besides, I'm the captain, how can I do such trivial matters?" Robin and Moria smiled secretly. Luo's face was extremely dark. The four of them chatted and laughed and walked towards the Reaper. The island was almost finished, and they were going to the next island. And just as they were about to step out of the town, a figure appeared in front of the four of them. When Yang Qing saw this figure, Yang Qing paused, and Luo's eyes flashed with solemnity. "What are you going to do?" Luo said bluntly, pressing his right hand on Yi Tadao Guixio's waist. Drizzt stared at the four people in front of him and seemed to be struggling with what to say. Then he scratched his head and looked at Yang Qing. "I want to make a bet with you." As soon as these words were said, the expressions of Luo, Moria, and Robin changed. They had all seen clearly how bizarre Drizzt's bet was, that it was a life-staking stake. "Oh," Yang Qing raised her eyebrows, as if surprised. "What's the reason?" "Standing in front of you." Drizzt took a deep breath. "I feel like my fate is twisted." "Fate?" Yang Qing smiled. The thing he didn't believe in was fate. From weak to powerful, from a commoner to a big pirate with a reward of hundreds of millions, how many people in this world have escaped their original destiny? Destiny is a shackle to break, but who can it bind? "Where's the bet?" Yang Qing asked again. This answer made Drizzt laugh, but the expressions of the three of Luo changed, and they shouted, "Captain," anxiously. "This cowboy man's ability is strange and terrifying." They don't want Yang Qing to suffer what happened. "If you lose, of course you will die. If I lose, I will join you," Drizzt said with a smile, as if he had no sympathy for this cruel result. "Oh, use my life for you," Yang Qing said with some playfulness. His casual expression made Luo and the others even more worried. "That's understandable." Drizzt nodded, both of whom had smiles on their faces, but made the others sweat. "So, shall we begin?" "Yes," Yang Qing said casually. This temperament that did not put his own life in his eyes made Drizzt's eyes flash slightly, and he was a little shocked. "Everything is in the card." With a handful of cards in his hand, a card appeared, and Drizzt threw it forward. Immediately, a circle of invisible ripples appeared on the ground, and layers of red cards covered a radius of 10 meters, wrapping the two of them in it. Then just for a moment, a card appeared in both of their hands. "Let's reveal the outcome." Drizzt threw out the cards in his hand. Yang Qing's eyes flashed and he looked at his card. At this moment, the three Luo people behind him were very nervous, and they were very worried about Yang Qing's safety. As a result, what was it like? With a casual throw, Yang Qing's cards also landed on the ground. At this moment, the eyes of several people in the field who saw the cards clearly shrank, and their pupils widened. This can't be bigger than this," Luo asked in shock. "It should be gone." Robin glanced at Yang Qing secretly. His luck is really good. Drizzt's hands trembled, revealing a wry smile. "I lost. I'll join you." Yang Qing smiled indifferently, then waved his hand. "Then, get on the boat. It's time to set sail." Luo and the others glanced at Drizzt, then quickly followed Yang Qing. Their eyes were a little weird, and they seemed to contain a trace of sympathy. After all, a gambler like Drizzt is lucky. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. It's really pitiful to lose to such a card. "Hey, Captain, did you expect that you would win?" Luo curiously carried the huge package and asked secretly. At the end, Drizzt's ears perked up. "No," Yang Qing replied. Back on the boat, everyone told Dylan's about this. Dylan's looked at Yang Qing strangely, and then said, "Are you using your new ability?" "No, it depends entirely on luck." Yang Qing smiled and said, "After all, I'm willing to admit defeat. I'm also ready to die." This sentence made everyone on the boat narrow their eyes and tremble slightly in their hearts. In the face of the unknown life and death, Yang Qing behaved very calmly. This kind of spirit is worthy of being their captain. "So, what exactly is that card?" Dylan's asked curiously, and his eyes swept to the strange man with a smile in the jeans jacket just uploaded. Luo and Mariah, Robin looked at each other, and then still said with a somewhat unbelievable tone, "Your Majesty." Dylan's narrowed his eyes slightly, looking at the lazy man sitting cross-legged on the bow. Chapter 55 _ If it's him, this card is also normal. Dylan's murmured suddenly, no longer bothering about this issue. Turning his head and looking at Drizzt, "So, what does this cowboy do?" "New crew," Luo Mumu said, a little ignorant. "Oh, you two go and put the sail down, we are ready to set sail." Dylan's lay on the bed, making arrangements, while Yang Qing returned to his old position, half-closed his eyes, and began to rest lazily stand up. The pirate ship set sail, and the sickle pirate flag fluttered in the wind, heading towards the sea. La and Drizzt went back and forth, arranging the things on the boat, and then Drizzt came to the helm. "Hello, newcomer, are you all right?" Dylan stopped loudly. "Actually, I'm a navigator." Drizzt smiled politely, and then he rubbed his hands, and several cards appeared in his hand. "Come and get one, Vice Captain." "Devil." Drizzt looked at Dylan's with some surprise, then he looked up at the waving pirate flag, and then his pupils shrank. "You, the god of death." "That's right, we are the death god pirates." Luo said in confusion, "You don't know." "Oh, my god." Drizzt sighed, and long tears appeared on his face. My destiny, has been twisted." In the evening, there is no doubt that another banquet has begun, and Drizzt is welcome to join. Drizzt was a cheerful, gentleman-like man who was easy to get along with, not detached like Dylan's, nor lifeless like Luo. He is a talent who is very suitable for adjusting the atmosphere, and the Reaper was suddenly full of laughter. During the next day, Yang Qing began to teach Luo to practice swordsmanship. Of course, he would not teach Luo those advanced swordsmanship, but just let him practice the basics of swordsmanship. By the afternoon, Dylan's was smiling all the time. Going to Luo and teaching Luo's physical skills, his strength is 3 times that of Yang Qing, causing Luo's face to shake constantly. "Boy, be more polite to me in the future." "Humph," Dylan said grimly. In Luo's eyes, Dylan seemed to have a demon with 2 horns on top of his head, and he couldn't help but tremble in his heart. This person is definitely a public revenge. The Reaper was walking in the North Sea, and half a year passed without knowing it. During this period, they also encountered other pirate groups, but almost all of them were shot by Luo. In just half a year, Luo's bounty has soared to 30 million Bailey. And Drizzt, the newcomer, has no ambition at all. He only concentrates on his career as a navigator, draws a few cards from time to time, and judges the next weather with a smile. Luo has grown a lot. Yang Qing sighed looking at Luo who was sweating and training himself. "Yes, this kid is very talented." Dylan's nodded. In half a year, he and Luo cultivated a close relationship. Although they were still fighting on the surface, their hearts were together. "Let's go to other sea areas," Yang Qing suddenly said. Dylan's was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay, I'll inform them." In half a year, they have seen almost all places in the North Sea. The knowledge has been greatly increased, and there are very few powerful pirates in the world, which just gives the new crew a chance to exercise. This is also Yang Qing's plan, to select some excellent crew members from the 4 seas, and then use the tempering of the 4 seas to let these crew members grow up. There is still a shortage of cooks. There is no one in the whole boat who can cook. Yang Qing thought of this problem. His face was shaking, which made him very sad. The Reaper soon drove in the direction of Upside Down Mountain under Drizzt's lead. After about a month, Yang Qing and the others had already seen Upside Down Mountain. Seeing this shocking scene again, they were still excited. Wow wow wow, the rising current is so exciting. Drizzt shouted, the rudder in his hand moved skillfully, and then with a bang, the Reaper rushed up the Upside Down Mountain, and it was like a roller coaster all the way. In the endless waves, the Death God swayed violently, and finally turned into a streamer and rushed into the sky. Yang Qing snapped a dozen fingers with his right hand, and a light mask appeared, covering the Reaper. Then, under his control, the Reaper slowly descended toward the West Sea. A quarter of an hour later, the Reaper landed smoothly in the waters of the West China Sea. Wow, boss, your ability is so strong that you can make the ship fly. Drizzt shouted. It was the first time he saw Yang Qing use his ability. Luo also looked at Yang Qing in surprise, secretly guessing that Yang Qing blew ability. Next, in this vast sea area, we have to find a chef. Yang Qing said lightly, causing the others to tremble, and they could hear the deep resentment in Yang Qing's words. Ahem, it's not like we haven't looked for it in the North Sea, but boss, you're too strict with the crew. Drizzt coughed, it's all about hobbies. Yes, the reputation of my death pirates has spread, and I don't know how many people are shouting to join us, but Captain, you just won't let me. In my opinion, that sister named Lassina is not bad. Dylan's complained. Don't talk nonsense, hurry up and make the boat move. Yang Qing waved. The Reaper continued to sail, Drizzt leisurely fiddling with the rudder and singing a pirate song. 3 hours later, the ship approached an island, and everyone, except Drizzt, disembarked. Oh, Goddess of Fate told me that it is not suitable to disembark today. Drizzt explained to Luo's questioning eyes. Cut. Luo turned his head and left in disdain. Drizzt had said this nonsense hundreds of times. Everyone got off the boat, naturally first. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Eat a big meal. I randomly chose a restaurant, everyone walked in, and after half an hour, the table full of food came. Just when everyone was about to finish eating, there was a loud bang from the side. Several people turned their heads and saw that the dining table was lying on the ground, and the plates fell to the ground. Boss, look, can this be eaten? It's so unpalatable, the man in the naval uniform shouted loudly, pointing at the food on the ground, full of anger. Chapter 56 Glades. Soon, the boss came out, but it was a 16 or 17-year-old boy. He came here with a smile and a puzzled expression. What's the matter with this officer? Then, he bent down, grabbed the muddy fried rice, and threw it into his mouth. At this scene, the shocked people around them all narrowed their eyes. The fried rice with dirt was so dirty that it was hard to eat. But the young man chewed it bit by bit and swallowed it. I tried it, and it was delicious. It was delicious. The young man put all the fried rice on the ground into his mouth one by one, and swallowed all the dirty food with a natural expression. This scene shocked the people present. It was the first time they saw such a person. Dirty food was put into the mouth without any care. It was not until all the grains of rice on the ground were eaten by the young man that there was not one left, and the young man stood up. The boy who got up, with a surprised sailor in front of him, his face became very gloomy. Anyone who doesn't respect food should go to hell. The young man suddenly stretched out his right hand, grabbed the sea soldier's head, and pressed it down fiercely. Bang! The sea soldier's head was severely pressed on the table, making a loud noise, and then, with a cold face, the boy started punching and kicking the sea soldier. Do you know how precious food is? Do you know? It's a damned person. The boy's eyes turned red, and he was so angry that he would never show mercy. The people around were stunned. The naval officer was beaten like this by a young man, and since the officer fell to the ground for the first time, he didn't move at all. This strange scene made people secretly surprised. Devil fruit ability. Luo's eyes flashed and he said. His food tastes good, that's all. Yang Qing said with a smile in his eyes, pointing at the crazy teenager in the field. The other members of the Death God pirates were all surprised. I don't understand why Yang Qing made this decision suddenly, and the whole crew of the ship did not raise any objections as to whether the young man would agree or not. Ask Robin, are their objections useful? This is a domineering and lovable captain who won't let the slightest objection from his crew. At this time, the boy finally stopped, and the sea soldier lay motionless on the ground, his face bruised. 2 minutes later, when the teenager shouted, "Go away," the Coast Guard trembled and stood up. Looking at the boy's eyes, he was full of horror. Then, holding back the severe pain in his body, he climbed out of the restaurant. "Glades, you hit the Marines, it's a big deal." An old man stood up and said worriedly, "I can't tolerate anyone disrespecting food." Glades clenched his fists and said viciously, "They don't know the value of food at all. Hey, take care of yourself, I advise you to leave here quickly." The old man shook his head, sighed, and left here. The other guests also stood up in panic and all left. The owner of this store beat the sea soldiers. This is a big event. The customers are not fools, so naturally they don't want to be too troublesome. "Lucifer, are we going?" Dylan's looked around quietly, and found that they were the only ones left, and asked in a low voice. Yang Qing shook his head and said with a smile, "Why do you want to leave? The food on the table is not finished yet. After you have finished eating, let's leave." The rest nodded and silently began to eat from the table. Glades turned his head and glanced at them, then withdrew his gaze and silently started cleaning the restaurant. In less than a quarter of an hour, there were dense footsteps outside the restaurant door. Glades paused for a moment, then said to Yang Qing and the others, "Let's go, there is a back door over there. If you don't leave, it will be too late. I don't want to implicate you." After he finished speaking, he ignored Yang Qing and his group and walked towards the door. Dylan's had a slightly contemptuous smile on his face, and everyone else ate in silence, not responding to Glades' words. Joke, their death god pirates would be afraid of a marine branch stationed on the island. Before Gettles walked out of the door, about 20 sailors had already entered the restaurant. The dense number of Marines with automatic rifles in their hands surrounded the small restaurant. Gedris stood in the middle, looking at the Marines surrounding him, looking a little dignified, his fists clenched tightly. More than 24 Marines surrounded him in the center, with their rifles pointed at him, putting him under tremendous pressure. Without knowing it, sweat seeped out from Gettle's head. "Don't move, if you move, I'll kill you with one shot." The leader of the Marines had a stern face and shouted coldly. Wearing military boots, he walked towards Gettles step by step. Glades became nervous. He is a good devil fruit person, but he has not been able to tap his ability, just use it superficially. In the face of these more than 20 rifles, he has no confidence to hide them all. One-on-one, Glades had enough confidence, but with more than 20 people, he moved randomly, and there was only a dead end waiting for him. "Yes, don't move." The sea soldier strode over, and then kicked his waist fiercely, causing Glades to fall back involuntarily and hit the table. A trace of pain flashed in Glades' eyes, but he stood still, with a hint of coldness in his eyes, staring fiercely at the sailor in front of him. "Don't look at me like this, I'll be scared." The sea soldier showed a grin and punched Glades in the face, knocking the latter to the ground. The sea soldier's fist was very heavy, and the punch made Glades dizzy. He was furious, his right hand was slightly clenched, and the surrounding air changed immediately. The sea soldier felt sharp and immediately retreated. The next moment, more than 20. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The rifle clacked continuously, pressing against his head, causing Glades to tremble. "I said, don't move, why don't you listen?" The sailor looked at Glades coldly. "Even the people from my Grand Island Marine Division dare to move, I have to admire your courage. Remember my name, Captain Hedson, and report it to those below when I die." Hedson looked at Glades gloomily, said viciously, and then slowly drew out the long sword from his waist. At this moment, there was a sudden noise in the restaurant. Hedson turned his head and saw 5 people stand up. His eyes instantly became colder. Looking at the 5 people, he said coldly, "Who are you?" "Ah, You ask us, we are pirates. Dylan's waved his hand and said something that stunned the more than 20 sailors present. Chapter 57 _ The more than 20 sailors headed by Hedson were indeed stunned. Their brains couldn't react, thinking they heard it wrong, and couldn't help but ask another question. You, who do you say you are? Pirates. Dylan's had a big smile on his face, and everyone except Yang Qing stood up. Pirates. Hedson heard clearly now, and very clearly. Brush. All the more than 20 guns were aimed at Yang Qing and the 5, causing Dylan's to raise his brows, Luo's face cold and holding the guikudao, while Yang Qing continued to drink water as if nothing had happened. Sea soldier, you are very courageous, dare to point the gun at us. Dylan's face turned cold, his words were very oppressive, and Hedson and others immediately became nervous. They saw 2 points from the expressions of the 5 people in front of them. First, this group of people was not afraid of them at all, and second, this group of people was not easy to mess with. Of course, because of the remoteness of this place, these Navy soldiers usually oppressed the people, but paid little attention to the pirates. As a result, they did not even receive the latest reward order, so they did not know the identities of Yang Qing and others. You are pirates, and you dare to stand here as if nothing has happened, you are courting death. Hedson's tone was very hard, he turned his head to Glades and said, you actually mix with pirates, you are dead. Now. Glades changed his expression and defended, I'm not a pirate. Hedson smiled sarcastically and didn't answer. I said you are, this island, you don't even know who is in charge, it's ridiculous. Boss, what do you say? Dylan's turned his head and asked, this team of Marines, they didn't mind. Leave it to Luo, Yang Qing said indifferently, then stood up and walked outside as if nothing had happened. Dylan's nodded, then followed Yang Qing. Moria Robin glanced at Luo, and walked out with a chuckle. These 4 people completely regarded the sea soldiers in front of them as air. In the face of more than 20 guns, Yang Qing and the 4 walked out with no fear on their faces. This scene shocked Glades, who didn't dare to move, and the demeanor of Yang Qing and others was completely remembered in his heart. Who are they? Glades was excited, faced with more than 20 guns and surrounded by so many sailors. As a pirate, he had a casual look on his face. What shocked Glades and the Marines even more was that they couldn't even react in the face of the swagger of the 4. It was as if there was a terrifying pressure on the young man at the forefront, so that no one could resist him. More than 20 guns trembled, but there was no direction of movement. Cold sweat broke out on Hedson's forehead, and when the leading young man passed him, a terrifying pressure covered his head and almost made him kneel. His intuition told him that this man was scary. It wasn't until the 4 of Yang Qing walked out that more than 20 Coast Guards came to their senses. They looked at the expressionless Luo and Glades, and just had their courage. Grab 2 of them, and then deal with those 4. Hedson said loudly. Luo Mu was stunned for a moment, and coldly spit out, room. With a sound of boom, a strange circle of light shrouded the place, and then the expressions of the seamen present changed greatly. Hedson seized the opportunity and attacked Luo. At this moment, Glades also activated his ability when he gritted his teeth. The surrounding air suddenly tightened and became much thinner. Luo's eyes flashed, looking at the latter. 3 minutes later, more than 20 sailors fell here. Luo gently inserted the long knife into the scabbard, and then faced Glades coldly, come with me. Glades was stunned for a moment, just about to speak, but saw that Luo had turned his head and left here. He glanced at the fallen sea soldiers on the ground, gritted his teeth, and followed closely. Half an hour later, Luo slowly followed Yang Qing and others who were wandering on the street, and then silently merged in. Dylan's turned his head to look at the 2 of them, smiled and said, Yo, come here, hard work, Luo. Trouble, Luo said disgustedly, too lazy to pay attention to Dylan's. Cut. Dylan's also rolled his eyes, and when he looked at Glades, his eyes lit up immediately. Boy, you're a chef, right? Glades was taken aback and nodded, yes. It's delicious, right? Dylan's asked, Yangqing and others also turned their heads and looked at him with bright eyes, a look of anticipation. Facing the strange group of people in front of him, when asked about his profession, Glades said proudly, "Of course, I am a very professional chef." Yangqing laughed and turned his head. Dylan's nodded with satisfaction. The others also showed smiles on their faces. Even Luo Leng's face was relieved a lot. They all seemed to think of the wonderful days in the future. "I brought him here, and I want to make a commission," Luo said solemnly. "Isn't this nonsense? There is still a commission for this." Dylan's waved his hand. "I need a sea tower stone." Luo ignored Dylan's and said to himself. Yangqing nodded. "Okay, that's it." A smile appeared on Luo's face, and Dylan's face was stinky. Glades followed the group closely, bewildered. Pirates, are they all like this? Of course, he knows that he must not ask more now. This is a terrible group of people. Just that young man just now easily settled more than 20 sea soldiers with guns, not to mention others. Everyone made a circle of purchases, and they played with great interest for 3 hours before heading towards the party. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Go with the pirate ship. Among them, Glades was very nervous, looking back from time to time, noticing if there were sailors chasing after him. The 5 naturally understood Glades' psychology, but they didn't care. This is normal. After Glades came here, his behavior, personality, and even ability were all looked at by Yangqing and others. When it was almost evening, Yangqing and others returned to the Reaper. As soon as he got on the boat, Glades saw a cowboy man lying on the ground, snoring and falling asleep, and he didn't seem to feel the arrival of the crowd at all. Dylan's covered his forehead and said helplessly, "This kid, every time he returns to the boat, he looks like this. Wake him up." Yangqing waved his hand and said, "Let's spend the night here tonight, by the way." Yangqing looked at Glades and smiled, "Celebrate the joining of the new crew." Luo walked over with a blank face, then kicked Drizzt, causing the latter to jump up. Whoever kicks me, it hurts to death." "It's you again, Luo." Drizzt had a toothache expression on his face, and then swept across Glaster from the corner of his eye. "Ah. Here's a newcomer. Not bad, Captain. This time the harvest is good, and I fooled the newcomer." "Shut your mouth." Yangqing's face shook, and she gritted her teeth. "This ship is so funny, what should I do?" Chapter 58 Principles. The addition of Glades undoubtedly brought another celebration on board the Reaper. After more than half a year, new crew members were welcomed on board again, which is indeed a happy thing. In the evening, after Dylan's and Luo got drunk, they entered the mode of long-lasting friendship and deep brotherhood. Drizzt was stunned when they saw it, and Yangqing, Robin and others couldn't stop laughing. "Luo, let me tell you, I admire you the most. Your kid has improved very well in the past 6 months. Let me tell you, Hiccup, you are my Dylan's best brother, Hiccup, who will bully you in the future. I'll take care of him without hesitation." "Ah, without hesitation." Dylan said half a sentence, hiccuped, causing the people on board to laugh. Luo was also confused, his face was flushed, and his eyes were intoxicated, and he began to express his lyricism. "Brother Dylan's, I will recognize you as Luo, and we will recognize the brothers and sisters of our death pirates. Growing up, you are my best siblings." Woo woo. Luo burst into tears, with tears all over his face. "From the moment I was born to the time I experienced that incident, my relatives, my best friends, and brothers have all died." He suddenly became full of hatred. "It's all because of him, it's all that man, it's all him. I'm going to kill him. I must kill him, avenge them, and avenge my best brother." Dylan's was startled, then hugged Luo tightly. "Brother, we will definitely avenge this revenge for you. The Death God pirates will not let him go. Until I met you, I was pulled over by the captain inexplicably. To be honest, I was very resistant at first, and it always felt weird." Luo laughed, looking stupid, which made everyone's serious expressions relaxed again. "But later, I met Brother Dylan's. I met Moria, and Robin, and then I contacted the captain. I found that everyone is a very easygoing person. Here, it gives me the feeling of home and makes me feel really protected. Every time I fight, although I was kicked out by this guy like Dylan's, but I know that you are all silently protecting me behind my back. I can feel the trembling of the space beside me. Every time I am in danger, the enemy will lose their strength inexplicably. I know that you are all helping me. For the past 6 months, my strength, speed, and ability have grown rapidly. This is the result of you, who trained me, protected me, and encouraged me like a family member. I know that everyone is a real family. Everyone on this boat regards this as home, our common home. Luo Drink's face was flushed, and he cried and laughed for a while. He looked very funny, but everyone present looked at him carefully and listened. They all know that Luo is speaking from his heart and speaks the truth after drinking. Luo, who was usually serious and cold, turned out to be like this when he was drunk, which surprised them and complicated their hearts at the same time. Every member standing on this ship, from the moment they joined, considers themselves a part of this ship. Between them, they are partners, brothers and sisters, and a family that lives and dies together. This is Yangqing's spiritual will from the very beginning. No matter how many crew members are added in the future, this spirit will never change and will be passed on forever. Glades quietly watched the people on the boat. There were not many crew members, only 6, but the short time spent together made him feel that these people were very much to his taste. Thinking about it, no one wants to be a companion with someone who is cruel and has endless conspiracies, which means it will be very tiring and hard work. This captain, looking at Yangqing who was drinking constantly and smiling, Glade's eyes shrank slightly, and he faintly felt that this was very courageous for the captain. Just at a glance, he could see the extraordinariness of the crew members present. The carefree Dylan's, who is open and close in every move, has a cheerful personality, but is very charming, the gloomy Luo, who is very skilled and resourceful, and the Trace who was lying on the ground when he got on the boat. Special, there is a smile in his eyes, but a wise light flashes. In addition, the 2 ladies, Mariah or erudite, proficient in medicine, Robin archaeologist, and their knowledge is also very good. And their captain Yangqing, being able to lead such a group of people together, undoubtedly does not explain his ability. Just in the daytime, seeing his calm and confident look, Glades felt that he was instantly conquered by his courage. This is a man full of charismatic leadership. He is born with the aptitude of a king. Like the ocean is full of rivers. It wasn't until late at night that Dylan's and Luo fell into a deep sleep. Yangqing sat on the bow of the boat, leaning lazily against the wall of the boat, resting with slightly closed eyes. He likes this place very much, with the comfortable sea breeze and a very sober feeling. Glades walked over, and the sound of his footsteps echoed in Yangqing's ears, causing the former to open his eyes. Under the moonlight, Yangqing's eyes shone brightly. "You're here." Yangqing smiled lightly. "Yes, Captain." Glades smiled and sat beside Yangqing, closing his eyes, enjoying the cool sea breeze at night. "How does it feel to leave your home?" Yangqing suddenly asked. "Feel?" Glades was stunned for a moment, then shook his head with a smile. "When I was very young, my parents offended the sea soldiers because of their personality, and they were executed on trumped-up charges." Looking at the deep sea and the starlight reflected in the sea, Glades said slowly, "My cooking skills are acquired from them. Over the years, I have been practicing my cooking skills, and they have always echoed in my mind. The gentle expression, and the encouraging look when I first learned to hold a knife." Quote. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. You definitely don't know, when I took the knife for the first time, I couldn't use my wrist, how ridiculous it was to tremble, hee. After my parents died, I inherited their restaurant by myself, and it has been in business for 5 or 6 years, until today. So, do you hate sea soldiers? Yangqing asked softly, looking at the sea. Hate? Glades shook his head, looking at the fish jumping in the sea. What's the use of hate? You shot the sea soldiers today because of the hatred in your heart, right? Yang Qing asked suddenly. No, it's not. Glades smiled, and then said softly, I beat him just because he wasted food. I can tolerate their hurt to my parents, and I can hide the hatred for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or more. Quote. But I can't stand their food practices. This is what my parents told me to adhere to the principle of life, the bottom line, which is what a chef must adhere to. And they died because of this. After hearing this, Yang Qing couldn't help but stunned for a moment, then turned his head to look at Glades. Chapter 59. Did they understand? Now, because of this reason, I was almost killed by the Marines, and then. Glades showed a smile on his face. I joined you. Yang Qing also smiled. So you have never been home before. He stretched out his right hand. Then, welcome to your new home. I am Lucifer, the captain of the Death Pirates, and that group of, idiots, boss. Captain. Glades also stretched out his hand and held Yang Qing's right hand tightly. At this point, Glades joined the Reaper Pirates, and this brand new pirate group finally welcomed the long-awaited chef. I was born into a noble family since I was a child, but I gave up the wealth, status, and power at my fingertips for my dreams. Yang Qing looked at the sea and said slowly, with a smile on his face. His mood did not fluctuate. Many people do not understand me, say I'm stupid, a nobleman, but he has a good life. What kind of pirate are you coming here? Ha ha. Yang Qing laughed. His eyes suddenly became sharp, and an invisible majesty spread out from his body, making Glades' face change slightly. However, how did they know what a dream is? Dream, 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 imagine. I like it, I do it, I want to do it, I have to do it. You can never talk about dreams with someone who only knows about power, status, wealth, and enjoyment, because they will laugh at you, mock you. They feel they have everything, live in peace and quiet. This is the good life. They do not pursue, longing for ease. Shazong is not enough to speak ice. Yan Ke is aware of Honggu's ambition. People with different consciousness and ideas will never understand you. Just like many people don't understand your parents. Why would you provoke powerful sailors or even lose your life for a principle? And they wouldn't understand why I gave up such a good life, my power, my status, and took this dangerous road. Glades listened to Yang Qing's words quietly. He could feel the strong momentum between the young captain's words. It was an indomitable and decisive determination. Think that you will become stronger if you sit at home. Concentrate your energy to have everything. It's ridiculous. Yang Qing sneered. Those who have not experienced hardships and sufferings will never grow up. They are just canaries in a cage. Even if no matter how fat or strong he grows, he is only a weak scum that a wild vulture can kill with one claw. If I want to be the strongest, I have to give up some. The world is fair, but it's very unfair. If you want to gain something, you have to lose something. Yang Qing said a lot in one breath. It seemed a little crazy. He drank too much. He had never said these words to anyone before, but today he said them to Glades. Both of them seemed to be a little excited, and the place calmed down slowly. Go and rest. You are welcome to join the Death God Pirates. After a while, Yang Qing said calmly. It's night, it's not too late. Glades nodded and left. When he walked to the bedroom, he turned his head and glanced at Yang Qing again. The young man was half leaning here, with a relaxed face, eyes closed, enjoying the sea breeze and the quiet. But at this moment, in Glades' eyes, this is a person with a story. In other words, every crew member on this ship has a story. At the top of the mast, Drizzt had a telescope around his neck, and he looked left and right from time to time. Today it was his turn to be on duty, and he looked very energetic, probably because he had slept for a long time during the day. The next day, at dawn, the people on the boat woke up. Dylan's patted his dizzy head, then walked out of the cabin. As soon as he came out, he saw Luo, staring at the heavy bags under his eyes, looking very tired. Yo, Luo, didn't sleep well last night. Dylan's teased. Long-winded. Luo glanced. didn't bother to pay attention to Dylan's, and started the morning exercise. Drizzt, set sail. When Yangqing's voice came, Drizzt responded. The sails bulged and slowly left the island. The 7 people began to exercise on the West Sea. After about half a year, the scenery of the West Sea was seen by several people. Then the Grim Reaper turned around and headed towards the Upside Down Mountain again. 2 months later, the Reaper came to Upside Down Mountain. This time, the target is the East China Sea. Yangqing looked at the Upside Down Mountain and said slowly, with light shining in his eyes. For him, the sea area of the East China Sea has a unique meaning. Everything in One Piece started from this small sea area. All the moving, blood and passion also start from here. When I went to the East China Sea, I wanted to experience the atmosphere of the protagonists. The Grim Reaper set foot on the road to the East China Sea without a single accident. An hour later, the Grim Reaper landed on the waters of the East China Sea. Looking at this sea area, Yangqing just said indifferently, "Go to Rog Town." Drizzt shouted, the rudder was full, and then slowly drove away in the direction of Rogue Town. The people on the boat were doing their own things, but they didn't notice anything unusual about Yangqing. Roger, Carp, Ace, Redhead. Muttering these names, Yangqing's thoughts drifted to another world, the emotion, tears, and blood when he watched One Piece in his previous life. Ace. Yangqing narrowed his eyes and squeezed his fist. There are many unfortunate people in the original work, but Yangqing thinks Ace is the most tragic. As the son of the Pirate King, he has a unique talent that is unique in 10,000, but such a person is dead. Died under the hands of Blackbeard, died under the conspiracy of the Marines, and the war on the top became his end. Such a person is too dead. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Pity. The powerful natural system burns the fruit, the unique talent. How can such a person say goodbye to this way by dying? Ace. Yangqing's eyes flashed fiercely. He would naturally not let such a talent go. To become the #1 in the world and fulfill his ambitions, there must be strong people on board. When he goes to the New World one day and intends to live in the world, he must have a strong partner to support him. This trip, East China Sea, Ace is his goal. But before that, he went to Rog Town to see what the place where One Piece was executed before his death was like. Just as the Reaper was heading towards Rog Town, a team of pirate ships was quietly approaching on a small island in the East China Sea. There were not many pirates in this team. The person who stepped off the boat first had a western sword on his waist, and his red hair shone dazzlingly in the sun. "Captain, this is Windmill Town," a man with a blonde shawl and a long nose said with a smile. "Okay, let's rest here for a while." The red-haired man laughed, and the crew behind him shouted and all got off the ship. Chapter 60 Windmill and Rog. The pirate group of about 7 or 8 people, headed by the red-haired man, got off the boat. Their unique pirate temperament immediately attracted the residents of the town, causing a little disturbance. But then, the people in the town dispersed. The arrival of this pirate group did not cause further riots. "Where's the bar in the town?" The red-haired man was carefree, with a long western sword slung around his waist at will, with a smile on his face that made a good first impression. "Just follow this path." After the initial panic, the villagers calmed down when they saw that the pirate group didn't seem like a bad guy. "Shanks, I'm going to have a good drink this time. I haven't had a drink on the boat for a month. I'm so greedy." The red-haired man strode forward, and the voice behind him resounded with a complaint. "Ha ha ha ha, okay, brothers, I'll have a big drink." Shanks laughed. His red hair was very dazzling in the sun, and his unique temperament led the whole pirate group forward. "Go." The laughter of the pirates echoed in Windmill Town and gradually disappeared. No one knows the origin of this pirate group, and no one knows the people of this pirate group. In this remote town, the news is blocked, and it is not so easy to accept information from the outside world. In Rog Town, a pirate ship gently docked without causing a trace of movement. This is the town of beginning and end, and the last stop on the East China Sea's Great Route. It occupies an extremely important position, so it has always been the main point guarded by the Marines. And the East China Sea has just gone through the big sweep of the Navy, and is at the cusp of the limelight. Therefore, the powerhouses stationed here are even stronger. Rogtown Marines are stationed in the base. So, your main target this time is this child. The 2-meter-tall, rough-looking Marine Major General looked at the old man and the young man opposite, and said with a deep expression. Yes, I'm going to take him to Luffy. The pirates are in chaos recently, and the sailors are also very nervous. Besides, the plan of the Warring States period is also very important, and this old man can't afford to be idle. Hey, the middle-aged man sighing, biting the donut in his mouth, he said helplessly. Beside him, a 10-year-old child listened quietly. The child was wearing a red vest and shorts. He had fine black pockmarks on his face and black hair. He seemed a little reticent to talk. What's his name? The Marine Rear Admiral asked suddenly. Ace, Portgas D. Ace. The middle-aged man patted the child beside him, but the latter avoided him. I want to educate him to be the most powerful sailor. Just like you, ha 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 ha. The middle-aged man was talking and laughing, as if he was very proud. The Major General on the opposite side flashed his eyes, nodded with a smile, looked at the child on the opposite side, but said nothing. Then, after staying with you for 3 days, it's time for me to go back, so I won't disturb you, Drago. The middle-aged man smiled and was about to turn around. Okay, father, Drago said with a smile. This middle-aged man is Lieutenant General Garp, a man known as a hero. His position in the Navy is very unique. As a lieutenant general, his deterrent power is stronger than that of a general, which is unique. Blue blue blue. Just as Garp turned around, the voice of the phone worm suddenly rang. Father, it's yours. Looking at Garp's confused look, Drago reminded with a smile. Oh, good, good. Garp fumbled around for a long time before he found the phone bug, then cleared his throat and connected the phone bug. Hey, Warring States, I'm Garp, what's the matter? Busy. Garp has always been like this, simple and direct, carefree. Drago naturally knew his father's character very well, smiled and said nothing, while Ace stood quietly. Cap, I'm Warring States. The voice of Warring States in the phone bug was a little solemn. Now, you need to go to the Great Waterway, start immediately without delay. Huh, Garp frowned and looked at Ace beside him, but... No, but you have to go to this matter. Warring States' voice was very decisive and unquestionable. The situation over there is very serious. Leave now, and I will send you the information later. Okay. Garp was a little helpless, and then the phone worm hung up. He looked at Drago. It seems that this child can only be placed with you first. Yes, father. Drago nodded. Then Garp left neatly and Ace stayed here, silently saying nothing. Drago smiled. He was also not good at teasing children. He greeted the Marines and brought Ace with him. Down. Then his eyes flickered, and he looked at the information on the table. The Tianlong people were insane. 3,000 slaves were paid tribute. 3/5 of them died in less than a month. The scene was bloodied and shocking. Innovative soldiers appeared on Soniri Island, and they have been brutally suppressed by the army. Only one person was dispatched, but more than 300 innovative soldiers were wiped out. The combat effectiveness is amazing. One message after another was seen by Drago, causing his eyes to flicker constantly. His thoughts began to change, his fists felt clenched, but finally loosened. A person's dreams and ideas are constantly changing with his experiences, and the one thing that remains the same is the stone. After experiencing more and more darkness in the world, a subtle change has begun in Drago's heart. The change in his thinking was impossible for Garp to detect, nor for him to notice. This is a secret that belongs to him alone. He has a new ideal and strives for it all his life. If the world is wrong, just set him right. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Mumbling, Drago said this in a low voice. On the coast, the members of the Death God pirates jumped out of the boat shouting. Hey, Luo, wait for me, run so fast to reincarnate. Dylan stood on the bow and shouted loudly. Luo walked below and ignored him. Seeing Luo's appearance, Dylan said to Glades again, "Cook, wait for me, let's go together." It turned out that when they got off the boat, everyone agreed to divide into 4 teams, and as a result, Dylan's was left alone. Moria and Robin are naturally a group, and Luo and Glades are a group. Young Ching has already disembarked, followed by Drizzt. There is no doubt that Dylan's was abandoned. "Hee, Drizzt, go with Dylan's, I'll go see it alone," Yang Ching said with a helpless smile when he saw Dylan's appearance.